A young nurse kissed the forehead of a millionaire lying in a coma. 2 minutes later, he opened his eyes and woke up hopelessly in love with her. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. A low, steady beep resonated down the quiet hallway of the Montgomery wing, tucked away in the far corner of the prestigious St. Aurelia Hospital. Most of the rooms were dimly lit. The hush of midnight rounds had passed, leaving only the occasional footsteps of nurses checking vitals. But near the end of that corridor, inside room 417, was a presence that not even the hush of night could mask. Lucas Montgomery, the famed CEO of Montgomery Enterprises, lying motionless in a coma. At that moment, Isabella White, one of the hospital's most compassionate and dedicated nurses, sat beside his bed, meticulously noting the readouts from the humming machines. Outside, the moon bathed the courtyard in a silver glow, a scene of serenity that contrasted sharply with the tension swirling around the man in the bed. Lucas Montgomery wasn't just another patient. He was a millionaire, heir to a long line of wealthy industrialists, and the victim of a mysterious yacht accident that had left him teetering between life and death. Rumors whispered through the hospital's halls that the explosion on his luxury vessel wasn't an accident at all, but a deliberate act of sabotage. Isabella, though, seldom paid attention to rumors. She had always believed in the simple power of caring for those who needed it most. Her shift officially ended hours ago, but she remained at his side, smoothing the linen blanket over his chest, observing the slow, mechanical rise and fall. She thought about the yacht sabotage, about the whispered theories that it was an inside job by business rivals, perhaps even a betrayal from someone within Lucas's trusted inner circle. Yet, in this quiet room, such conspiracies felt distant and unreal. To Isabella, the priority was clear: watch over her patient, no matter his social standing or wealth. That unwavering dedication was what had caught the attention of Dr. Elaine Fowler, the chief physician overseeing Lucas's care. "Isabella," Dr. Fowler had said earlier that morning, patting her on the shoulder, "don't burn yourself out. You haven't left his bedside for the last 2 days. Go home, rest." Isabella had simply offered a polite smile, the kind that came so naturally to her. "I will, doctor," she'd answered, though not quite believing it herself. Dr. Fowler had sighed, knowing she couldn't force the nurse to leave, especially when Isabella's presence seemed to calm the entire unit. Now, as midnight drifted into the early hours, Isabella felt something shift in the hospital's atmosphere. Lucas's monitors beeped in a steady rhythm, but the air around them felt charged with a significance she couldn't name. She leaned forward, adjusting the drip of medication that kept infection at bay and ensured his sedation level remained stable. Yet behind those closed eyes and that silent exterior, she sensed a flicker of life, a stubborn refusal to surrender. Outside the large window that overlooked the garden, a single star shone brighter than the rest, piercing the blackness of the sky. Isabella found her gaze drawn to it. She recalled as a child making secret wishes on the brightest star she could find. Wishes for her mother's illness to disappear, for her father's debts to vanish. Although she couldn't recall if those wishes ever fully materialized, she always felt that the act of wishing imparted a gentle hope. A sudden movement from Lucas, barely a twitch of his left hand, pulled her focus away from the window. She caught her breath, heart pounding. Carefully, she touched the back of his hand, hoping for a repeat sign of movement. Nothing. The moment dissolved, and the hush resumed. Isabella exhaled, forcing herself to stay calm. Dr. Fowler had mentioned that coma patients sometimes made involuntary motions, but in that quiet moment, it felt like more than reflex. It felt like a call. "Don't give up on me." As the hour approached 1 in the morning, Isabella decided to check on some of Lucas's older medical charts, searching for any detail overlooked. She found them stacked on the side table, notes from the day he was admitted. Collapsed lungs, head trauma from the blast, severe burns on the upper torso, extensive bruising. Reading that list again made her shiver. He was lucky to be alive. Her eyes landed on the date circled in red ink. It was the same date as today, just 1 year ago. By some bizarre coincidence or twist of fate, tomorrow morning would mark Lucas Montgomery's 32nd birthday. A birthday in a coma, she thought. Her chest tightened at the unfairness of it. When Isabella rose to straighten his sheets once again, she remembered how birthdays in the hospital always stirred complicated emotions in her. Some families would come bearing balloons and homemade cards. Others would arrive in tears, terrified that the day might be their loved one's last. Lucas, wealthy as he was, had no throng of well-wishers. No visitors except the occasional delegation of stern-faced lawyers or bodyguards who made sure not to linger. It was rumored that his stepbrother visited exactly once, exchanging terse words with Dr. Fowler before leaving abruptly. That was the extent of Lucas's support. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and one of the night shift nurses, Gianna, entered with a tray of medications. She glanced at Isabella and managed a tired half-smile. "Still here? You're unstoppable," Gianna murmured, placing the tray on a nearby counter. "You sure you don't want me to relieve you? I can finish up so you can go home." Isabella shook her head gently. "I appreciate it, but no. I'd like to be here tonight, especially since, well, you know—" She paused, remembering how close she felt to this patient despite having known him only under these circumstances. "It's his birthday tomorrow." Gianna studied Isabella's determined expression. "All right, but please don't push yourself. I'll be at the station if you need me." Left alone again, Isabella approached Lucas's bedside and softly took hold of his hand. The darkest hours of night seemed to stretch out, the silence occasionally broken by a distant overhead page or the beep of a machine. In that silence, her mind drifted. She pictured the sabotage on the yacht, how the bomb, if it was indeed a bomb, might have been planted near the engine, how it was timed to detonate during a solitary midnight voyage. She imagined Lucas, isolated above the waves of the ocean, jolted by a violent blast, body thrown mercilessly against metal fixtures. Would he have recognized the betrayal in those final conscious seconds? The question swirled without answers, fueling her resolve to keep vigil by this man's side. Then she remembered something Dr. Fowler had once told her. "We've seen coma patients respond to stimuli in unexpected ways. Sometimes they hear us, even if they can't respond." Isabella had no illusions that her presence alone could snatch Lucas from the clutches of unconsciousness, but it couldn't hurt to speak to him. Her voice, albeit quiet, might become an anchor in the darkness he was drifting through. She glanced at the digital clock near the bed, 1:43 a.m. In just a few hours, the date on the calendar would turn, ushering in Lucas Montgomery's birthday. Carefully, Isabella took a seat. She let her hand rest over his, leaning forward so she could speak as if he might truly hear. "Lucas," she began softly, "I know we've never really met. At least not with you able to answer back, but here I am, talking to you anyway. It's almost your birthday, you know. 32, that's still so young. You have your entire life ahead of you if you wake up. They say you're brilliant, that you built half of your fortune with innovative ideas no one else dared to pursue. I wish you could open your eyes just for a moment to see what people have been doing on your behalf, and to see there are still some of us who want you to live." Her voice sounded fragile in her own ears. She wasn't sure if she was crossing a line by opening her heart to a man who might never hear her. But the thought of him dying without ever hearing kindness or sincerity in the aftermath of betrayal weighed on her. For the next hour, as the clock inched toward 3 in the morning, Isabella spoke intermittently about small details, how the hospital's coffee was awful, how she once read in a tabloid that Lucas Montgomery loved sailing from a young age, how she believed that people deserved second chances, no matter their mistakes. When at last the digital clock glowed 3 a.m., Isabella felt an inexplicable wave of emotion. The hush in the room seemed to deepen, almost as though time were pausing to allow her a moment. She leaned close. His face, though battered by the accident, held a gentleness she hadn't noticed before. There was a faint scar near his left temple and bruising that had turned a sickly yellowish hue. Yet, behind it all, Isabella sensed the remnants of a strong spirit. A man once unstoppable in business, now rendered powerless. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice catching. "I don't know if you can hear me, but it's your birthday. Happy birthday." Her breath trembled as she placed a soft kiss on his forehead. A gesture that should have been inconsequential, but in the stillness of the moment, it felt monumental. "Come back to us," she pleaded quietly. "Please come back." The gentle beep of the heart monitor continued as if to underscore the quiet plea. Then, with that single gesture of compassion, her lips lingering on his forehead, she let her tears fall. They were silent tears, the kind that come when empathy and fatigue collide. Barely 2 minutes later, the machine that recorded Lucas's vitals emitted a sudden spike. At first, she thought it might be a glitch or a false reading. But then, beneath the pale hospital fluorescence, she saw it. A faint flutter of his eyelids. Isabella froze, inhaling sharply. Another beep, sharper this time. She couldn't tear her eyes away from his face. One of his hands gave the subtlest twitch, a sign that his mind was stirring within the depths of unconsciousness. She sprang into action, pressing the emergency button to summon Dr. Fowler, all the while leaning forward to examine Lucas. "Lucas," she whispered, voice on the edge of trembling with both fear and hope. "Lucas, can you hear me?" Then, in the quiet, accompanied only by the mechanical hum of the respirator, his eyes opened, just a crack, but enough to reveal a glint of confusion and awareness. Isabella could hardly believe it. She watched as he tried to focus on her face, his breathing ragged beneath the oxygen mask. Miraculously, he tried to speak, though only the faintest sound emerged, rasping and broken. She leaned closer, heart pounding so loudly that it echoed in her ears. "I heard everything," he croaked, each syllable shaped by a desperate will to communicate. "You—" Lucas paused, seeming to drift, before blinking again. "You said, come back." Isabella's entire body shook with equal parts relief and amazement. "Yes, I did," she whispered, tears threatening to choke her voice. "Yes, Lucas, I did. We want you back. We all do." Their eyes locked for a moment, one pair exhausted and confused, the other brimming with emotion. Outside, the distant thunder of footsteps signaled the arrival of Dr. Fowler and a flurry of medical staff. But for that instant, it was just the two of them in a suspended world, a woman who had poured her heart into caring for a stranger, and a man awakened from the brink of death by a simple, tender gesture, one that would define both their lives from this moment forward. As the medical team rushed in to examine Lucas, Isabella stepped back, her thoughts in chaos. She'd done something unthinkable. She had gently kissed the forehead of this powerful man on his birthday, and within minutes he had reclaimed consciousness. Now he was staring at her as though she were the one lifeline he recognized in the sea of doctors and nurses. 1,000 questions filled her mind. How was this possible? What had he truly heard? And would the sabotage that nearly took his life remain a threat to him, and maybe even to her? Yet in that whirlwind, one thing was certain. Lucas Montgomery had awakened with a fierce awareness, one that included the nurse who cared for him. Soon the rumor would spread that the millionaire in a coma came back to life after a birthday wish and a nurse's gentle kiss. But little would anyone guess about the threads of love, danger, and secrets that would begin to weave themselves around Lucas and Isabella in the days to come. The flurry of commotion brought by Lucas's sudden awakening spread through St. Aurelia Hospital like a gust of wind on a still lake. In less than 10 minutes, a swirl of doctors, nurses, and technicians converged on room 417, their faces a mix of disbelief and astonishment. Alarms on the machinery kept chiming with readings that, for the first time in weeks, indicated active and responsive brain activity. Dr. Elaine Fowler, who moments earlier had been grabbing a rare hour of rest, arrived in a hurry with her white coat half-buttoned. She hastily glanced at the monitors, verifying Lucas's vital signs with a sharp eye born from years of medical experience. Everything confirmed the unthinkable. Lucas Montgomery, the comatose heir left for dead after the yacht explosion, was returning to consciousness. In the corner, Isabella pressed herself against the wall, giving the medical team space to do their work. She was still grappling with the realization that her small gesture, her whispered words and gentle kiss, had somehow coincided with this miracle. The hush of the early morning had transformed into a labored excitement, yet in her own mind, everything felt almost suspended, as if time had slowed down around them. A short distance from the foot of the bed, Gianna stood with her hands clasped. She caught Isabella's gaze, both of them exchanging stunned smiles. Gianna mouthed a silent phrase, "You did it," although Isabella merely shook her head in modest denial. She had no illusions that her presence alone had revived Lucas. Medically speaking, there were countless factors at play. But in the front of her mind remained that indescribable moment, his eyelids fluttering open just seconds after she whispered, "Come back to us." Dr. Fowler bent over Lucas, gently lifting his eyelids to check pupil response. "Lucas?" she said calmly, focusing on his eyes as they dilated in reaction to the overhead light. "Can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" His gaze wavered like someone who'd awakened from a long, disorienting dream. He attempted to form words, lips trembling over the respirator, but managed only husky murmurs. Even so, there was something unmistakable in the way his eyes scanned the room, as if searching for a particular face. At last, Dr. Fowler turned toward Isabella. "You, come closer. He's trying to say something," she instructed, stepping aside and motioning for Isabella to approach. Isabella felt her pulse quicken. Among all the doctors and staff, it was she he seemed to be straining to see. Heart pounding, she moved to Lucas's side, placing her hand lightly on the bedrail. His eyes locked on hers. She thought she recognized a flicker of relief in them. "Lucas," she whispered, leaning so he could see her clearly. "We're here. You're safe. You're in the hospital." Her voice trembled slightly. She glanced at Dr. Fowler, who nodded for her to continue. "I'm Isabella, one of your nurses." Lucas tried to speak again. His voice rasped through cracked lips, muffled by the oxygen mask. Ella. Each syllable scratched like shards of glass. Yet to everyone in that room, it was the clearest sign of progress. A man battered and near death, forcing his vocal cords to produce the name of the nurse who'd become his lifeline. Dr. Fowler quickly gestured for an assistant to remove the mask, replacing it with a nasal cannula to ease Lucas's attempt at speech. When the transition was done, Lucas inhaled painfully. Then, in a voice that still rattled, he managed, "I heard you talking. At night." Isabella felt tears threaten to well up again, but she composed herself. "That's right," she replied softly, recalling the countless times she'd sat at his bedside, reading vital signs or simply sharing fragments of her day in case it might help him subconsciously. "I was talking to keep you company." With a slight nod, Lucas attempted to swallow, wincing as though each motion was an ordeal. Dr. Fowler signaled for the staff to get a cup of ice chips ready. Isabella carefully took a small spoonful of the crushed ice and helped him ingest it, the cold relief easing his parched throat. The entire medical team watched in something akin to reverence. Yet amid this emotional scene, Isabella sensed undercurrents of urgency. His awakening, miraculous or not, was going to trigger questions. A wealthy businessman doesn't simply fall victim to a boat explosion without stirring a hornet's nest of speculation, conspiracies, and suspicion. Inside her chest, an unspoken worry began to bloom, If someone had tried to kill him once, what would they do now that he was awake? Dr. Fowler, bright-eyed with cautious optimism, laid a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder. "You're still very weak," she explained, speaking in a measured tone. "We need to run more tests, check for possible complications from the coma. But this is wonderful news. You're doing incredibly well considering everything your body has endured." Lucas nodded, though his gaze never left Isabella. It was as if he needed her presence, her calm, steady voice, to anchor him. Meanwhile, Gianna and a few other nurses stepped out to ensure that no more than 2 staff members hovered at once. The beep of monitors and the occasional hush of staff in the corridor stood as reminders that this hospital had other patients, other crises, but for now, Room 417 was the epicenter of an unfolding medical marvel. Finally, Dr. Fowler turned to Isabella. "He might respond best to you if he needs something," she said in a quiet undertone. "Stay close, at least for the next hour or so. Then we'll move him for imaging, perhaps a brain scan, to see how extensive any injury might be." Then, facing Lucas once more, she gently added, "I'll be back soon." He gave the faintest nod of acknowledgement. Dr. Fowler departed with half the medical team, leaving behind only a pair of technicians who started prepping equipment for a quick scan of his reflexes and muscle response. Isabella watched from Lucas's side, offering the occasional word of reassurance whenever she saw him flinch or draw a sharp breath. An hour slid by in a surreal haze. The technicians tested Lucas's motor responses, shining lights in his eyes, asking him to move a finger, then a foot, then to try speaking in short phrases. He could comply with some instructions and struggled with others, but the results were better than any staff member had dared to hope. Eventually, they concluded their immediate tests. The moment the last technician left, Isabella found herself alone with Lucas again. The overhead light felt harsh, so she switched it off in favor of a softer lamp in the corner. That warm glow turned the hospital room into something resembling a private refuge. Isabella studied Lucas, noticing details she'd overlooked before. The way his hair, dark and slightly wavy, framed a forehead marred by a faint scar. The color of his eyes, icy blue, though now clouded with fatigue. A subtle tension remained around his jawline, suggesting either pain or the weight of unspoken worries. Unable to resist her natural caretaker instinct, Isabella reached for a moist cloth to wipe his brow, carefully avoiding the tender spots left by the burn scars. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It felt almost intrusive to speak in normal tones, given the profound stillness that reigned between them. Lucas's gaze followed her motions. "Like I've been asleep for years," he murmured. His words came out in fragments. A hint of dryness lingered in his tone despite the ice chips. "And everything hurts." She nodded, offering a small, empathetic smile. "You've been through a lot," she said, letting him see the genuine sympathy in her eyes. "Your injuries were serious, but you're safe here." The mention of injuries stirred something in him. His face flickered with recollection. "The boat," he said in a wavering breath. "Explosion. A tremor took over his voice, and he closed his eyes as if confronted by the memory of fire and shrapnel. Why was there an explosion? Isabella hesitated. She didn't know how much or how little he already remembered, nor how much she was supposed to reveal. Most staff members suspected sabotage, but the details had never been openly confirmed. "We're not fully sure," she replied gently, trying to keep her voice steady. "The authorities have been investigating. I've heard talk that it wasn't an accident." Lucas's brow furrowed. He opened his eyes once more, a hardened resolve flickering in them. "Someone did this," he whispered. Even in his current weakened state, that statement vibrated with certainty. Though she wanted to reassure him, Isabella realized she could only confirm the possibility. People suspected, yes. For a moment she thought about how alone he'd been during the coma. Few visitors, mostly lawyers or bodyguards. Why had none of them stayed by his bedside the way she had? She decided to voice a question that had been nagging at her. "Lucas, do you have anyone you'd like me to call? Family or friends who might be able to come see you?" At the mention of family, a flash of bitterness passed over his expression. "My stepbrother," he managed, the name almost spat out. "Emmett. He visited once?" Isabella nodded. "Yes, briefly. He came with a couple of men in suits but left soon after speaking with Dr. Fowler." Lucas exhaled in a way that was half chuckle, half scoff. "That's Emmett," he said, eyes casting downward. "And my father is gone. No other siblings, friends, can't trust them." He swallowed, the dryness in his throat still affecting his speech. "It's complicated. They might be involved, or maybe not. I don't know who to trust." The weight in his words was undeniable. Here was a man who'd built an empire, only to find that in his darkest hours, loyalty and love were in short supply. Isabella felt an ache of empathy. "We'll figure it out," she said, the phrase sounding perhaps more optimistic than certain. "For now, focus on recovering." Their eyes met, a moment of silent accord where no more words were needed. She recognized that his situation demanded more than just medical healing. Emotional scars from betrayal, from not knowing who had tried to kill him, might run deeper than the burns on his body. The beep of the heart monitor drew her attention, reminding her to record the updated vitals. Carefully, she moved to the console, logging his stable improvements. She typed in notes for Dr. Fowler. Lucas awakened spontaneously at 3:02 a.m., responding to verbal cues, partial motor function restored, pain management plan to be adjusted. Through the reflection of the console's screen, she saw him watching her, an intensity in his gaze that made her heart flutter. After finishing her notes, she turned back. "Is there anything you need? Water? More ice chips? Or—" He shook his head gently, then lifted a hand, beckoning for her to come closer. She obliged, leaning in, unsure what else he wanted. "I remember your voice," he said, his tone subdued but unwavering. "Talking about coffee, your family, talking about second chances, all while I was out." A flush crept up her cheeks. She recalled those nights telling him small pieces of her life in hopes that the sound of a human voice might anchor him. "I never thought you could hear any of that," she admitted, swallowing down a hint of embarrassment. He managed a weak smile. "I heard enough to know you care." The heart monitor beeped, and outside a passing nurse paused to glance inside but then left them alone. Lucas's eyelids drooped, signaling fatigue. Still, he fought to keep them open. "Don't leave," he whispered, his voice barely audible now. She gave him a soft smile. "I won't," she promised, resting her hand lightly over his. The moment filled with a warmth that was more than just the hospital's climate control. It was a connection, intangible yet undeniable. For a man like Lucas, who might have spent decades building fortune and forging alliances, maybe this was the first time he'd felt unreserved kindness with no strings attached. Time passed in a hush as he drifted toward a more restful sleep, still tenuous in his recovery, but undeniably out of the coma. Isabella carefully changed the dressing on a small wound near his collarbone, her touch practiced and precise. Each bandage revealed the extent of past injuries, the faint bruises marking his torso, the pinkish scars starting to fade. Yet beneath these wounds, she sensed a spirit that refused to be extinguished. At last, with a final dab of antiseptic, she stepped back, drawing the privacy curtain so he could rest. Before she left, she lingered a moment, absorbing the sight of him, alive, conscious, and so different from the silent figure she'd known for weeks. She wondered briefly, had her kiss truly been the trigger, or was it destiny that had decided at that precise moment, to return him to the world of the living. Slipping into the corridor, she let the soft hush of the hospital greet her. The overhead lights hummed, and a distant floor cleaner whirred. At the nurse's station, Gianna looked up, arching her eyebrows in silent inquiry. Isabella gave a thumbs up, the best answer she could muster. Soon she knew Dr. Fowler would have to schedule deeper neurological exams, maybe consult with an investigative team about the nature of his injuries. But for now, as the dull gray light of morning began to seep through the windows, Lucas Montgomery was resting safely, and the rumor was already circulating among staff that the nurse's gentle birthday kiss had awakened him. While Isabella jotted down final notes for the shift, her thoughts kept drifting back to Lucas. She recalled the quiet intensity in his eyes, the flicker of pain when he mentioned his family, the vulnerability in his request, "Don't leave." That vulnerability was starkly at odds with the powerful persona he'd likely displayed before the accident. Did this near-death experience change him? Or would he, in time, revert to the cutthroat businessman the tabloids had described? She pressed her lips together, feeling the flutter of uncertainty. She didn't know what the future held, for him or for herself, but one thing was undeniable. Fate had bound their lives in a moment of midnight tenderness, a catalyst that had led Lucas Montgomery to open his eyes, and somehow she couldn't help but sense that her own life would never be the same again. Bright beams of early morning sunlight stretched across the polished floor of St. Aurelia Hospital's main corridor, bathing everything in a gentle warmth. Yet inside Lucas Montgomery's room, the buzz of fluorescent lights and the hush of cautious optimism overshadowed any sense of normality. Over the previous few hours, medical staff had paraded in and out, conducting a flurry of tests to confirm the extent of Lucas's miraculous awakening. X-rays, CT scans, neurological checks, every department wanted a piece of this extraordinary case. Amid the churn of doctors and nurses, Isabella caught moments with Lucas, offering cups of water or spoonfuls of ice chips to soothe his painfully raw throat. Each time she approached, his gaze seemed to spark with recognition, as if drawing reassurance from her presence. And each time, she felt a subtle jolt of warmth, remembering the unspoken bond formed in those silent nights when she'd talked to him, prayed for him, and ultimately shared that fateful kiss on his birthday. Now, well into the morning, Dr. Fowler completed her latest examination, carefully removing her stethoscope from Lucas's chest. "Breathing is stable, blood pressure normal for someone in his condition," she noted to the resident at her side. "He's coherent enough to answer basic questions, though let's keep the sedation mild to manage pain." Turning to Lucas, she spoke in a kind but firm tone. "I'm sure you're exhausted. We won't push you too hard today, but we do need to monitor you closely. If you continue improving, we can discuss next steps." Lucas, lying against raised pillows, nodded with a small exhale. His skin appeared pallid from weeks of inactivity, and the angles of his face were sharper than before the accident, but something in his eyes radiated alertness. "Thank you," he rasped, swallowing with an audible wince. He seemed eager for more than just a clinical approach. "When can I find out who did this to me?" He spoke slowly, fighting through the dryness. Dr. Fowler took a step back, expression gentle. "That's more of a matter for the authorities, Lucas. You'll have to speak to them, or your family, or your attorneys, whoever is handling your affairs. Our job is getting you on your feet again." Lucas responded with a mute nod, though frustration flickered beneath his calm veneer. Isabella, standing near the foot of the bed, recognized that look. Anger at the unknown enemy lurking in the background. She felt a pang of sympathy, but she kept her professional composure. She gave him a reassuring smile, and he responded with a subtle lift of his eyebrows. Once Dr. Fowler stepped out, Isabella approached with fresh bandages in hand. "We'll change your dressings," she said softly. "Then you can rest." It was a mundane task, But the significance of him being awake to feel the discomfort versus unconscious and unaware wasn't lost on either of them. She began removing the old gauze from a patch on his left shoulder, revealing the half-healed burns. Lucas inhaled sharply at the sting of fresh air on the wound. "Sorry," she said, voice tinged with concern. "I'll be as gentle as I can." He managed a faint nod. "I can handle it." But despite his bravado, his eyes squeezed shut when she dabbed antiseptic on the reddened skin. His exhales came in ragged bursts. Isabella slowed her touch, pressing lightly to avoid aggravating the healing areas. She worked efficiently, tucking away used dressings and applying fresh, sterile gauze. Once she finished, she noticed him blinking away a few tears. Whether from pain or frustration, she couldn't be sure. Perhaps both. Seeing his vulnerability made her chest tighten. "You're doing really well," she offered, placing a hand lightly on his forearm before drawing back. "For a man who's just come out of a coma, you're handling this better than most." He opened his eyes, scanning her face. "Better than... thanks to you," he managed. "You stayed." Isabella felt a flush creep into her cheeks but kept her expression measured. "I'm your nurse," she said gently. "It's my job to stay." Inwardly, though, she knew it wasn't just duty that had kept her by his side all those nights. Lucas's gaze held hers a moment longer, as if absorbing unspoken words. Finally, fatigue seemed to weigh on him. He closed his eyes, letting his head settle back against the pillow. Isabella stepped away to give him space. She didn't want to push him into any deep conversation or force him to unravel his anxieties in front of medical staff. One thing was clear. He needed rest, both physically and mentally. By mid-afternoon, a rumor had circulated through the hospital halls. Emmett Montgomery, Lucas's stepbrother, was on his way. A hush seemed to follow that name. Even the seasoned nurses looked up, some with curiosity, others with faint trepidation. Emmett's reputation, though less public than Lucas's, was whispered about among staff. While Lucas was known as a bold investor, Emmett was rumored to be the more shrewd and, some said, ruthless figure behind certain family dealings. Isabella noticed a subtle tension overtaking Lucas after he learned Emmett was coming. Although he said nothing overt, his posture became stiffer, and his request for a mild pain reliever came sooner than usual. She administered it quietly, not wanting to prod him about family drama. But the anxiety in his eyes told her everything. Sure enough, around 3 o'clock, the doors to Lucas's room swung open to reveal a tall, impeccably dressed man in a tailored charcoal suit. Sharp features, dark hair brushed back, and an expression too poised to be comforting. This had to be Emmett Montgomery. Behind him trailed 2 associates, similarly suited, their eyes scanning the space with practiced caution. The air of intimidation was palpable. Lucas, though weak, instinctively pushed himself higher against the pillows, arms trembling from the exertion. Isabella, who had been checking an IV drip, took a half-step back to allow the tension-laden reunion to unfold. Emmett paused at the threshold, one eyebrow arching as he surveyed his brother, alive and alert in the hospital bed. "Lucas?" Emmett spoke in a polished tone that carried both concern and an undercurrent of coldness. "I heard you'd finally come to. You have no idea how relieved we are." The word relieved dripped with something more complex than simple relief. It carried a guarded edge as though concealing other motives. Lucas eyed his stepbrother with open wariness. "Emmett," he greeted, voice still raspy. "I suppose you're here for answers." "I'm here to check on you," Emmett corrected, stepping closer. He looked at Isabella with a superficial smile, as if to acknowledge her presence. Then he returned his attention to Lucas. "You gave us quite a scare." Lucas stared, unblinking. "Yes, well, seems it takes more than a yacht explosion to finish me off," he said, a faint sarcasm lacing his tone. Although the words came slowly, they carried a sting. Isabella realized this might be the first confrontation between them since Lucas regained consciousness, and possibly the first chance for Lucas to glean whether Emmett could be part of the sabotage. Emmett clasped his hands behind his back, exuding a studied calm. "Indeed, we're all grateful you pulled through. The lawyers want to ensure your affairs remain stable during your recovery. There's a board meeting soon. Montgomery Enterprises can't pause, even if its CEO is indisposed. We'd like your input if you're up to it." His voice was honeyed, but Isabella sensed a thinly veiled impatience. Lucas's jaw tightened. "I'll need time. I'm not heading to any board meeting like this." He glanced at the IV lines, the bandages on his torso. "You can handle it, for now." Again, the subtext, "I know you want power, Emmett." Emmett inclined his head, as if conceding the point. "Of course, we'll manage. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, do you have any recollection of what happened that night on the boat?" Lucas's eyes narrowed. Isabella paused in her tasks, heart tensing at how direct the question was. It sounded less like a concerned brother and more like an investigator fishing for clues. "Not much," Lucas lied. Isabella could see he was guarding some recollection. "Just the sound of the explosion." Emmett held his gaze for a beat, then gave a slow nod. "When you're more rested, you might remember details. Let's hope you do. The authorities have been poking around, but there's little evidence. If you recall anything important, let me know. The underlying meaning, if you remember who tried to kill you, you'd better tell me first." Silence settled, broken only by the steady beep of monitors. Emmett cleared his throat and redirected his stance, attempting a more affable demeanor. "Your doctors say you're improving rapidly. That's good. I'm sure with rest and therapy, you'll be back to form in no time." He feigned a warm smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll let you recover. But please, call me if you need anything." Lucas didn't respond with thanks. He simply blinked, the only visible concession to the man's departure. Emmett turned to go, and his associates trailed behind him. Before stepping out, he cast a last glance at Isabella, offering a polished but inscrutable nod. She inclined her head politely, feelings unsettled by the undercurrent of threat in his presence. When the door closed, the tension in the room dissipated, replaced by the rhythmic hum of the hospital environment. Lucas let out a long exhale. Isabella approached, adjusting the bed angle so he could lie back more comfortably. "Are you okay?" He managed a sarcastic chuckle. That was typical Emmett, pretending concern while measuring me for a coffin. The bitterness in his voice was stark, a sign that the brotherly bond was far from affectionate. Isabella pressed her lips together, uncertain if she should delve into family dynamics. "You need to keep your strength," she finally said, "so if his visits tire you, we can regulate them." Lucas gave a minuscule nod. That's probably wise. His breathing seemed steadier now, though speaking was still an effort. He glanced around as if ensuring no one else was eavesdropping. "Thank you for letting me handle him." She offered a calm smile. "Of course, just be cautious. I'm not sure how safe you are." The moment she said it, her own words surprised her. Typically, she wouldn't become so personally invested in a patient's affairs. Yet everything about Lucas's situation felt extraordinary. Lucas met her gaze, a flicker of relief crossing his features. "I appreciate that. I trust you." Those 3 words, quiet, unadorned, set off a small quake in Isabella's chest. Trust was a powerful commodity in a world where betrayal lurked in the shadows, especially among the wealthy. She inhaled softly. "Try to rest. I'll check in on you soon." Then she turned to leave, heading to the hallway to fill out updated notes on his record. The tension from the confrontation with Emmett still lingered, but Isabella also felt a surge of protective instinct rising inside her. Outside in the corridor, she found Gianna, who had just finished delivering medication to another patient. "So that was the infamous Emmett, huh?" Gianna muttered, glancing back at Lucas's door with a wary expression. Isabella nodded, letting out a breath. "He's intense. Lucas is exhausted just from a few minutes of conversation with him." Gianna rolled her eyes. "He marched in here like he owned the place. I heard the staff at the front desk say he barely gave them a greeting before heading up. For what it's worth, keep an eye on Lucas. I get the feeling that man's interest isn't purely brotherly love," as if Isabella needed the reminder. She'd sensed that same uneasy vibe, like Emmett wanted to gauge how much Lucas recalled. Whether Emmett played a role in the attempted murder remained unconfirmed, but the possibility tugged at Isabella's mind. She thanked Gianna and resumed her tasks, trying to shake off the looming sense of danger. Later that afternoon, she made her scheduled rounds, checking vitals in other wings. However, her thoughts kept drifting to Lucas's room. She found herself glancing at her watch, keenly aware of the hours until she could circle back and see if he needed anything. When her break finally arrived, she headed down to the hospital's small cafeteria, ignoring the bland array of vending machine pastries in favor of a quick coffee. Her mind swirled with fresh questions. If Emmett's presence was a stress for Lucas, who else might show up? Lawyers, yes, but perhaps police officers or investigators from the insurance company. Possibly even unscrupulous individuals trying to glean how much Lucas remembered. She pictured them attempting to slip into his room by night, and her stomach twisted. A beep from her phone startled her. She checked it. A text from an unknown number. He woke up. Surprising. Keep him safe. There was no signature, no indication of who sent it. The hair on her arms prickled. Could it be some well-wisher? Or a veiled threat from an anonymous associate who wanted Lucas under control? She locked her phone, heart pounding, and gulped the last of her coffee. The liquid tasted acidic on her tongue, mirroring the unease roiling within. Unsure how to proceed, she decided not to mention the text to anyone just yet, especially not to Lucas, who had enough to worry about. For the moment, she'd stay alert, watch for any suspicious visitors, and keep him informed if necessary. Making her way back upstairs, she passed by Dr. Fowler, who was conferring with a neurology specialist about Lucas's test results. She overheard a snippet. Significant improvement in cortical activity. Minimal memory gaps. The conversation was hushed, but it implied Lucas might recover fully. That was good news in the medical sense, though it might also put a larger target on him if sabotage was indeed involved. If he could recall more details about the explosion, the real culprit would want him silent. Isabella paused in the hallway, forcibly steadying herself. She couldn't descend into paranoia. She was, after all, just a nurse. The best she could do was care for him, keep him from stress, and ensure no suspicious characters had unfettered access to his room. She'd always believed in the power of compassion, but in this scenario, her role felt dangerously close to a guardian, and with Emmett's looming figure and mysterious messages, that role might prove more perilous than she'd bargained for. She inhaled, straightened her shoulders, and proceeded to Lucas's room. Outside the door, she gathered herself, mentally preparing to adopt the calm, capable demeanor her patients needed. Then she stepped in. Lucas, half dozing, stirred as soon as he sensed her presence. "Long day," he murmured, blinking away drowsiness. She nodded. "I'm sorry if you've been bombarded. I can help limit visitors." He glanced around as though confirming they were alone. "No visitors, but you." A ghost of a smile flickered on his lips. "I prefer it that way." He paused, eyes wandering to the bandages on his arms. "What do we do next?" The question wasn't purely medical. Isabella heard the deeper query beneath it. How do I fight back against those who tried to kill me when I can barely stand? She approached and laid a gentle hand over his, mindful of the IV line. "Next, you recover, regain your strength, and then you decide who you can trust and how you'll move forward. They locked eyes, an unspoken vow of solidarity passing between them, a vow that said, "You're not alone." Outside, the hospital bustle continued, phones ringing, pages echoing. But in that quiet circle of lamplight, Lucas and Isabella stood at the threshold of an alliance neither had foreseen. Their paths, once worlds apart, were now woven together by fate, by a suspicious explosion, and by a quiet midnight kiss that had changed everything. A faint overhead chime announced the end of visiting hours at St. Aurelia Hospital, yet the corridors remained active. Night shift nurses took their stations with the resigned calm of those used to late hours, and a few remaining visitors trickled out. In room 417, though, time felt suspended. Lucas, propped against carefully arranged pillows, fought to keep his eyes open as the day's final medical checks wrapped up. "Elevate the bed another 10 degrees, Isabella told the orderly who assisted her. Her voice was steady, efficient. She stepped forward to adjust Lucas's oxygen supply, ensuring he had enough flow without overexerting his healing lungs. Lucas watched her with a weariness that bordered on peace. The day had been chaotic. Various doctors, lab technicians, and even hospital administration staff had lined up, each requiring something from him. A blood sample here, a recheck of neurological reflexes there, new signatures for hospital forms, and all of it felt rushed. An undercurrent of anticipation thrummed through every visitor, as if the story of the millionaire who woke from a coma demanded swift developments. Now, with the bustle winding down, Isabella turned to him, holding a small cup of liquid medicine. "For pain relief," she explained, gentle yet firm. "You're still tense. This will help you rest tonight." Lucas swallowed, recalling the ache that radiated from his burn wounds and the throbbing soreness in his muscles. "Thank you," he murmured, taking the plastic cup. After downing its contents, he exhaled, half expecting a bitter aftertaste. But Isabella had discreetly provided him with water, so he chased the medicine with a few cautious sips. She carefully took the empty cup from him, depositing it on a tray. "It might make you drowsy," she warned softly, "but it's better that way. Your body heals best when you're asleep." He nodded, then shifted his gaze to her face. In the softened glow of the bedside lamp, she looked composed, her features reflecting genuine concern rather than the polished distance he often encountered in corporate or high society circles. "Will you stay?" he asked, surprising himself with the directness. Her expression flickered with something he couldn't quite name. "I'm on duty a while longer, and Dr. Fowler asked me to keep a close eye on you," she answered, then a small, almost shy smile. "Don't worry, I'll be around." His body relaxed a fraction. Though he was far from comfortable, his wounds were far too fresh for that. There was a measure of relief in knowing she would remain near. "Good," he breathed, the single word carrying a subtle undertone. "I need you here." Not long after, while Lucas dozed lightly, Isabella stepped into the hall, her shift clock ticking. She had to confirm patient notes, check the distribution of evening medications, and liaise with Gianna about the upcoming handoffs. As she strode to the nurse's station, the overhead lights cast a mellow glow across the polished floors. Most of the day staff had gone, leaving behind a skeleton crew. Behind the station's high counter, Gianna was hunched over a stack of charts marking updates. When she spotted Isabella, she lifted a hand in greeting. "You're still with Lucas, right?" she asked in a hushed tone. "Yes," Isabella replied, leaning in. "I'm just updating his chart before checking on the others." Gianna angled her head thoughtfully. "And how is he, really?" Isabella took a moment to think. "Healing, but still so uncertain. I can see it in his eyes. He's waiting for something. Answers, closure. It's like he can't fully exhale until he knows he's safe." Her voice softened. "And I'm worried about his mental state too, not just physical." Gianna offered a sad half-smile, tapping her pen against the counter. anyone would be distraught, waking up to realize they were nearly murdered. Just keep doing what you do. You have a knack for calming people. Isabella nodded, but a knot tightened in her stomach. The text message she'd received that day. He woke up. Surprising. Keep him safe. Still hovered at the back of her mind. It wasn't exactly threatening, but it wasn't comforting either. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone yet, and it weighed on her conscience like a secret she wasn't sure how to handle. Suddenly, another nurse approached with a phone handset. "Isabella, a call for you on line 2, she said, handing it over. "They asked for you specifically." Isabella exchanged a puzzled glance with Gianna. Taking the handset, she pressed it to her ear. "This is Nurse White," she said quietly. There was a brief silence on the other end, punctuated by soft static. Then a male voice spoke, low and cautious. "You're the nurse caring for Lucas Montgomery, correct?" Her pulse quickened. "I am," she answered, glancing at Gianna, who mouthed silently, "Who is it?" Isabella shook her head, indicating she didn't know. "Listen carefully," the man continued, voice hushed, as if he might be looking over his shoulder. "Lucas is in danger. He's not safe at that hospital. There are people who will want to ensure he doesn't talk." Isabella's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this? Are you with the police, or—" "I can't give my name," he interjected. "But you need to believe me. His brother's involvement is only part of a bigger scheme. If you want to keep Lucas alive, watch everyone who visits, especially those who come under the guise of lawyers or company reps." Her nerves spiked. "Are you saying Emmett or his associates might try to—" The man cut her off, his urgency palpable. "Just trust no one, not even official-sounding people. They're all pawns in something larger. Get the police involved if you must, but don't let your guard down. This is the second time they've tried to finish him off." "Second time?" Isabella echoed, startled. Before she could probe further, the line clicked dead, leaving only the faint hum of an ended call. Isabella stared at the handset, breathing shallow, mind racing. Gianna leaned over, eyes wide. "Who was that?" Isabella shook her head slowly, returning the handset to its cradle. "He didn't say, but it seems like Lucas's accident might not have been the only attempt on his life." Her voice came out unsteady. "He warned me to be careful with who sees him." Gianna's brow furrowed, genuine concern etching her features. "Isabella, this is dangerous. You should report that call to Dr. Fowler or security." Her thoughts reeled. Moments earlier, she'd been troubled about a cryptic text. Now this phone call, another anonymous warning. "I will," she promised. "But first I need to talk to Lucas. Let him know." A beat passed, and she added almost to herself, "And figure out if the police are already on this." Gianna nodded, giving her arm a supportive squeeze. "Be careful, okay?" Isabella paced outside Lucas's door, steadying her nerves. She considered waking him immediately to share the news. He was dozing, likely still feeling the effects of the pain medication, but the anonymous caller's message echoed in her mind. Trust no one. She swallowed hard, unsettled by the notion that even hospital staff could be compromised. Finally, she entered quietly. The room was dim, illuminated by the soft glow of an overhead fixture kept on its lowest setting. Lucas's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but even. She hesitated by his bedside. Telling him now, in his weakened state, might intensify his fears. Yet hiding it also felt wrong. If he was in real danger, he deserved to know. After all, this was his life on the line. Gathering her resolve, she gently set a hand on his forearm. "Lucas," she whispered, "I need to speak with you." Her voice, though soft, carried a seriousness that pricked the edges of his consciousness. He stirred, eyelids fluttering open, focusing on her with some effort. "Is everything all right?" he asked, trying to shift upright. She offered a hand to help him adjust his pillow. "I'm sorry to wake you, but there was a phone call. Someone warning me you're not safe here. They claim there's a second attempt in the works. That your accident might not have been the only attempt on your life." The statement hung in the still air. Lucas's lips parted, alarm blossoming behind his eyes. Who called?" Isabella shook her head. "An anonymous man. He wouldn't identify himself, but he sounded sincere, urgent. He mentioned your brother's involvement being just a piece of something bigger." Her throat felt thick as she continued. "He said to watch every visitor, no matter their credentials, that some might come disguised as lawyers or business reps." Lucas inhaled shakily, his posture tensing despite the pain it must have caused. "So, they might try something here? In the hospital?" "It's possible," she admitted. "I was about to notify Dr. Fowler and the hospital security, but I wanted you to know first. You have to be careful with anyone who tries to see you." A moment of silence passed before Lucas's jaw set determinedly. "Don't tell too many people," he murmured, voice straining with the effort. "If the hospital staff has a leak, the wrong person might get alerted that we're on guard." Isabella frowned. "So you want to keep this quiet?" "For now," Lucas insisted, meeting her gaze. "We can't risk exposing our hand to an inside accomplice if there is one." He paused, exhaling a shaky breath. "I know I sound paranoid, but—" She shook her head. "No, you have every right to be cautious. I'll talk to Dr. Fowler discreetly. She's trustworthy, but we'll keep the circle small." The idea of a conspirator roaming the hospital halls sent a chill through her veins. Lucas seemed to relax slightly, reassured that she was taking him seriously. "I'd like the police, but maybe it's not safe to bring them in fully yet. We need some evidence. A statement from me isn't enough if there's a hidden network. They could spin it as paranoia from my injuries." Isabella nodded slowly, sensing how precarious the situation had become. The man was stuck in a hospital bed, recovering from life-threatening wounds, while unknown parties potentially plotted to silence him. "Understood. We'll tread carefully. But please, if anything seems off, tell me." He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of her words. "I will," he whispered. Then, blinking them open again, he added, "You asked if I remembered anything from the explosion. I did recall something earlier today. Not a face, but a voice on the deck telling me to turn the engine on myself. They insisted. It felt odd, but I dismissed it. Then, the blast." Isabella's eyes widened. "Someone asked you to do it personally, as if they wanted you to be physically in harm's way?" He managed a nod, though the memory clearly pained him. "I can't place the exact voice, but it was urgent, like they wanted to ensure I was near the engine compartment." His breath caught and he winced, a flare of pain crossing his features. She touched his shoulder gently. "Enough. Don't push yourself." The significance of this memory was jarring. Whoever orchestrated the explosion intended Lucas to be at ground zero, making it look like a tragic accident or self-inflicted mistake. She filed that information away, heart pounding at the implications. Outside the window, a shadow passed along the hospital's rooftop, just a routine maintenance worker perhaps. But after that phone call, everything felt like a potential threat. Quietly, Isabella pulled the curtain to reduce any outside visibility. "Try to rest," she told Lucas softly. "I'll be close by. We'll figure this out." Before stepping away, she felt him reach for her hand. Weak though he was, the grip conveyed a silent question. "Will you really stand by me in this fight?" She threaded her fingers carefully around his. "You're not alone," she answered the unspoken plea. "I promise." Shortly after midnight, Isabella and Gianna convened with Dr. Fowler in a small break room. They spoke in low voices, ensuring no one else could overhear. "I received an anonymous call," Isabella began, retelling the details of the warning. Gianna confirmed having heard Isabella's end of the conversation. Dr. Fowler, arms folded, listened intently, brow creased with worry. Anonymous tip-offs aren't uncommon in high-profile cases, she finally said, but we can't dismiss the possibility that it's credible. We know Mr. Montgomery was likely sabotaged. Gianna added, he suggested we not inform too many staff. Possibly there's a leak. That means we should keep his security discreet. Dr. Fowler nodded, deliberating. We do have a private security detail we can hire for high-profile patients, typically arranged through hospital administration. But if Lucas doesn't trust official channels, we could attempt something less overt. Limited staff access, code-locked entry, rotating guard presence. Isabella looked from one to the other. Lucas doesn't want to draw attention, but we need to do something. I can't be the only line of defense. Dr. Fowler's lips pressed into a thin line. All right, let me contact someone I trust on the board. Someone who's aligned with patient safety first. We'll discuss adding a plainclothes security guard to the floor. Just one or two, not an entire team. That way, we'll know exactly who's coming in. Thank you, Isabella breathed, relief threading through her anxiety. He's so vulnerable right now. The doctor's expression softened. I know you're worried, Isabella, and rightfully so. But we'll keep him safe. No harm will come to him under our watch. She paused, adding gently, meanwhile, get some rest when you can. I see you pushing yourself well beyond your scheduled hours. Isabella managed a small smile, though she knew rest would be elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, images of unknown assassins creeping into Lucas's room flashed in her thoughts. I'll try, she promised. With that, Dr. Fowler left to arrange the new security measures, Gianna returned to finalize some paperwork, and Isabella lingered by the break room window, staring out at the moonlit parking lot. She'd never imagined nursing could lead her into a labyrinth of conspiracies and threats. Yet here she was, entangled in a high-stakes situation that felt more like the plot of a thriller than everyday patient care. Slipping back into the corridor, she moved quietly to Lucas's room, half expecting a sudden intruder or strange figure lurking by the door. But the hallway was peaceful, patrolled only by the distant hum of fluorescent lights and the gentle shuffle of a janitor mopping the far end. Inside, Lucas was asleep, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm, evidence of the pain meds taking effect. Isabella approached his bedside and, confirming he was stable, sank into the chair beside him. Dim lamplight illuminated the planes of his face, showing the faint lines of tension that never fully disappeared. She imagined the nightmares that might plague him, the flashbacks of an explosion and the betrayals lurking in every conversation. "Hang in there," she whispered, more to herself than to him. She reflected on the improbable bond they'd formed. Him, a powerful CEO accused by tabloids of ruthless business tactics, and her, a nurse devoted to the well-being of those under her care. A day or two ago, Lucas had been just another comatose patient she'd refused to give up on. Now he was someone she felt protective of, a man whose life might hinge on who to trust and who to fear. She stayed by his side for some time, listening to the soft beep of machinery. At intervals, she glanced at her phone, paranoid that another cryptic text or call might arrive. But nothing came. Maybe their anonymous tipster had said all they intended to say. Eventually, Isabella rose. She checked his vitals one more time, then tucked his blankets in place, feeling a pang of tenderness she tried to rationalize. This was all part of her duty, wasn't it? She couldn't let her emotions blur professional lines. But in the quiet of that dim hospital room, such lines felt undeniably blurred. She recalled how she'd whispered pleas for him to come back, how she'd kissed his forehead in a moment of pure compassion, and how he'd awakened as if summoned by that act. Caught between mounting tensions and the hush of the sleeping ward, she resolved to stay vigilant. Perhaps the next hours would prove uneventful, or perhaps everything would change in an instant. With a final glance at Lucas, Isabella flicked off the lamp, leaving a single overhead fixture to guide her out. She slipped back into the hallway, promising herself she'd return soon. There were so many unknowns, but one truth stood firm. Until Lucas could defend himself, she'd stand guard, quietly but resolutely, against the shadows closing in. Night's deepest hours crept toward dawn, and a subdued stillness enveloped St. Aurelia Hospital. The rhythmic hush of ventilators and the faint beep of monitors were the only companions in the dimly lit corridors. Patients slept, doctors rested in on-call rooms, and the few nurses on duty moved quietly from station to station, tending to those who needed them most. Inside room 417, Lucas Montgomery's slow and steady breathing underscored the fragile peace. Isabella had spent part of the night perched in a chair near his bed, fighting off drowsiness to fulfill her self-appointed vigil. She rose multiple times, once to confirm that the new plainclothes security guard stationed near the elevator was indeed who he claimed to be, and once to check the lock on the door leading to a supply closet that connected behind Lucas's room. Everything seemed normal. Perhaps the anonymous warnings wouldn't materialize into any real threat, at least not tonight. Just after 4 a.m., Isabella stepped out for a quick round of the ward, verifying that other patients were stable. She consulted quietly with Gianna by the nurses' station, exchanging updates, verifying that no unknown visitors had appeared, and then returned to Lucas's side. The overhead lights in his room were turned low, leaving the faint glow of medical equipment to illuminate his resting form. He lay angled slightly to ease the pressure on his healing burn wounds, his breath faintly audible in the hush. Isabella exhaled, shoulders loosening. She'd been on edge for hours, expecting something, anything to disrupt the night. But time had passed uneventfully. Deciding Lucas was settled, she resolved to slip down to the break room for a moment, intending to grab coffee or a minute of rest. She hesitated, though, scanning the room one last time. The phone on the bedside table was in place, the door was locked, and the curtains were drawn to prevent onlookers from peering in from the hallway. Satisfied, she left. The break room stood at the end of the corridor, a small space with a humming refrigerator, a battered microwave, and a set of mismatched chairs. Gianna was already there, cradling a steaming mug of tea. "Shouldn't you try to get an hour's sleep?" she asked in a hushed tone, lips curving in a knowing smile. Isabella shook her head. "I can't. Not yet. My shift ends soon, but after that call—" She trailed off, not wanting to repeat the details again. Gianna reached over and patted Isabella's forearm. "I understand, but you'll do Mr. Montgomery no favors by running yourself ragged. Sometimes a half-hour break can reset your mind." Isabella knew she was right. She poured coffee into a foam cup, took a grateful sip, and grimaced at its bitterness. "I'll rest once I'm sure the night's truly quiet," she conceded. She forced a smile, but it fell short of genuine warmth. Gianna studied her friend's face, about to offer more encouragement when the overhead speakers crackled, announcing a code gray on a different floor, likely a security disturbance. Both nurses stiffened, exchanging glances. This code had nothing to do with Lucas's wing, but any mention of heightened security now made Isabella's heart jump. "Probably just a confused patient," Gianna said, trying to sound casual. "No reason to think it's connected to everything else." Isabella nodded, though tension still rippled through her. She took another swallow of coffee, wondering if her worry was quickly turning into hypervigilance. "I'll finish this and head back," she murmured. A few minutes later, after forcing herself to remain in the break room long enough to collect a shred of composure, Isabella set her empty cup aside and walked back toward Lucas's room. On approach, she noticed two things simultaneously. The door was no longer fully closed, it was ajar by a few inches, letting out a strip of dull light, and a man in a hospital gown, possibly another patient, stood partially hidden against the wall near the threshold. Her pulse jumped. Had someone come in unannounced? She picked up her pace, calling, "Sir, are you lost? This area is restricted at night." Her voice carried authority, but inside she braced for a confrontation. The figure turned his head, revealing a gaunt face and messy gray hair. His expression was startled, eyes shifting anxiously. I got confused," he stammered. "I was looking for the restroom." He had the shaky voice of someone who might truly be disoriented. Isabella let out a slow breath, scolding herself for her suspicion, though her guard remained up. She forced a polite smile. "Let me help you get back to your room, okay? The restroom is down the hall." He nodded with relief, allowing her to guide him a few steps away. Glancing over her shoulder, Isabella noted that Lucas's door was indeed ajar. She made a quick decision. "Hold on just a moment," she told the man. "I need to secure this door. Then I'll take you to the restroom." Without waiting for a response, she stepped back to room 417 and peered inside. The sight pricked her with alarm. Lucas's bed was empty. Her heart lurched. The sheets were in disarray, the IV line carefully draped on the side. No sign of a struggle, no forced movement, just an empty bed. She rushed inside, flicking on brighter lights. The bathroom door stood open, lights off. She peered beneath the bed, into the bathroom, checked the closet. Nothing. Panic seeped into her chest. Lucas could barely walk unassisted. Where could he have gone? She ran back to the corridor, scanning left and right. The older patient in the gown blinked at her. "What's wrong?" he asked, momentarily forgetting his own confusion. Isabella ignored his question, spotting Dr. Fowler passing at the far end of the hallway. Waving her arms, she called out, "Dr. Fowler, over here!" Her voice was urgent. "Lucas is gone. His bed is empty." Dr. Fowler, eyes widening, hurried to join her. "Gone? Could he have walked out? He's in no condition for that." "I have no idea," Isabella replied, her voice trembling. The door was left partly open. Dr. Fowler wasted no time. "Get security on the line, check the camera feeds. He couldn't have gotten far on his own. Maybe he became disoriented and tried to find us." Even as the words left her mouth, an eerie thought plagued Isabella. Could someone have quietly coaxed him out or manipulated him into leaving? She wanted to believe that Lucas had simply awakened confused, but the anonymous warnings echoed in her mind. Could it have been an abduction so subtle he offered no resistance? Swallowing her dread, Isabella turned to the older patient. "Sir, I'll have someone else assist you in a moment. We have an urgent situation." Then, with Dr. Fowler's nod, she sprinted to the nurse's station, heart pounding. A flurry of activity ensued. Gianna placed calls to security, requesting them to sweep the floor. Dr. Fowler organized staff to check the wards and the stairwells. The plainclothes guard they'd assigned earlier was roused from his post near the elevator, claiming he hadn't seen Lucas emerge. Isabella, pulse pounding, hurried down the hallway, pushing open doors to vacant patient rooms, scanning each. "Lucas!" she called in a hushed, frantic tone. Empty. She reached the end of the wing, turned a corner, and paused at the sight of a supply closet door slightly ajar. Approaching carefully, she inched it open. Inside, the overhead bulb flickered, illuminating rows of linens and medical supplies, but no sign of Lucas. "Come on," she muttered to herself, heart racing. She checked a label that read "Staff Only," stepping inside another small storage area. Nothing. Anxiety churned in her stomach, and the memory of the phone call made her blood run cold. He's not safe at that hospital. They might come for him. She could almost hear his voice in her head. "Don't tell too many people. We can't risk a leak." Had he been lured out by someone wearing a staff badge? She felt an urgent need to call the police, but she also recalled Lucas's fear that the hospital might harbor infiltration. Dread twisted her thoughts, but she pressed on. Suddenly, from around the corner came Gianna's voice. "Isabella, over here! Hurry!" Isabella bolted in that direction, nearly colliding with Gianna in a narrow hallway near the back stairs. Gianna pointed toward a partially open door that led to a rarely used service stairwell. "Someone saw a figure heading in there," Gianna gasped. "Could be him or them." Adrenaline surged. Isabella yanked the door wide, the heavy metal scraping. A stale draft greeted her, and the staircase stretched downward into dimness. "Lucas?" she called, voice echoing. No reply. Gianna glanced behind them. "Security's combing the other floors. Let's be careful." They descended slowly, footsteps echoing on concrete steps, the only light coming from sparse overhead fixtures that hummed with an anemic glow. Everything smelled of disinfectant and dust. Halfway down, Isabella froze, noticing something on a step, a faint smear of blood. Her stomach flipped. She bent to inspect it, fresh, still wet. "Gianna," she whispered, pointing it out. "This might be his, or someone else's. Either way, it's not good." Before Gianna could respond, a muffled noise drifted up the stairwell, like a quiet scuffle or perhaps a cough. Isabella's heart hammered. She lifted a hand, signaling Gianna to remain silent, then continued downward, each step measured. The corridor twisted into a lower level seldom used by regular staff, mostly older wings and mechanical rooms. At the foot of the stairs, the hallway forked left and right. Dim exit signs buzzed overhead. Isabella crouched to see if she could spot footprints or more blood. She caught a faint smear trailing to the left corridor. She signaled Gianna, who looked pale but resolute, and together they followed the trail. Around a corner, they nearly stumbled upon two figures. The first wearing a dark hoodie hunched over someone else sprawled on the floor. Isabella's heart gave a jolt when she recognized the second figure's face. Lucas, eyes half open, leaning against the wall. The person in the hoodie had one hand braced on Lucas's shoulder, the other gripping him under the arm. They seemed to be guiding or forcing him along. The stranger turned sharply, noticing the nurses. Isabella saw a flash of alarm in their eyes. They hissed, "Stay back!" Yet, in that instant, Lucas managed to jerk his head in Isabella's direction, his expression a mixture of relief and pain. There was blood on his lower lip, perhaps from biting it in distress or from being manhandled. "Lucas!" Isabella cried, ignoring the warning. She stepped forward, adrenaline drowning out fear. "Let him go!" The stranger half lifted Lucas's body as though preparing to move him around a corner. But Lucas, clearly dizzy or drugged, resisted weakly. The movement caused him to stumble, and they both staggered. Isabella took advantage of the moment, lunging forward to grab Lucas's free arm. Gianna, though trembling, advanced alongside Isabella. "We've alerted security," she bluffed, voice rising with authority. "They're on the way right now." A flicker of indecision crossed the stranger's face. Without warning, they released Lucas, who slumped into Isabella's grasp. Then the figure whirled around, sprinting down the corridor. Gianna called out a futile, "Hey!" But the intruder vanished into the shadows, heading toward an emergency exit. A distant clang suggested they'd found a door leading outside. Isabella, arms wrapped around Lucas's torso, lowered him carefully to the ground. He was panting, face drawn. "What? Who?" she managed, barely coherent in her shock. Lucas tried to speak but coughed, groaning at the pain radiating from his healing wounds. His breath came in ragged gasps. "They said they'd help me," he rasped, eyes flaring with anger at his own gullibility. "Thought I needed a different room, then realized they wanted to get me alone." Gianna crouched beside them. "We need a stretcher. He shouldn't be walking on his own." Isabella nodded, heart pounding. She brushed the hair off Lucas's forehead, noticing sweat and a trace of fresh blood near his temple, likely from a minor impact. "Hang on, it's all right," she soothed, her panic masked by the calm edge of professionalism. "You're safe now." He grimaced, his eyes closing. "They tried. Said there was an urgent scan. I believed them." The anger in his voice turned to self-condemnation. "Shh," Isabella murmured, carefully examining him for obvious injuries. "Don't blame yourself. They were deceptive. Let's get you back upstairs." Gianna radioed for assistance, her voice tight with urgency. Meanwhile, Isabella maintained a gentle hold on Lucas, feeling him cling weakly to her shoulder. She listened for footsteps, security, or the culprit's return, but the corridor remained quiet, except for Lucas's pained breaths. Her stomach churned with the realization of how close he'd come to vanishing. Within moments, a pair of security staff arrived, accompanied by a nurse with a rolling wheelchair. Relieved, Isabella and Gianna guided Lucas into the chair, supporting his unsteady body. His face contorted with each movement, a raw reminder of his fresh injuries. One security guard crouched, inspecting the blood trail on the floor. "We'll lock down the lower exits," he declared. "Whoever that was can't have gone far. We'll find them." Another guard radioed updates about a potential intruder. Lucas let out a shuddering breath, as if the adrenaline had begun to subside and the pain meds from earlier were wearing off. Isabella placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Focus on breathing," she advised, heart still pounding. "We're getting you back to your bed." He nodded mutely, all fight momentarily drained from him. Gianna and Isabella wheeled him carefully through the corridors, the security team fanning out ahead and behind. Staff who noticed them stared with concern, whispering among themselves. The tension was thick, but Isabella refused to let fear paralyze her. She kept her voice steady and reassuring, telling Lucas they were almost there. Back in room 417, Dr. Fowler was waiting, her expression a storm of worry and anger. She helped them transfer Lucas to his bed, then immediately checked his vitals. While Gianna assisted, Isabella quickly explained the minimal details. A disguised individual had lured him out, presumably under some pretense of treatment, then tried to move him elsewhere until she and Gianna intervened. Dr. Fowler's jaw tightened with rage at the breach of patient safety. Despite the chaos of returning him to bed, Lucas wouldn't let go of Isabella's hand. She felt his fingers trembling, the shock of near abduction etched into his eyes. She offered gentle, comforting words, telling him he was safe now, that they'd find the culprit. The reality, though, weighed heavily on them both. This was no random incident. Someone inside the hospital had orchestrated a trap meant to isolate him, maybe to kill him. When at last Dr. Fowler stepped back, declaring that Lucas had no new major injuries aside from a bruised temple and aggravated burns, he sank into his pillow, breathing in shallow gasps. Isabella stood at his side, resolved never to leave him alone again if she could help it. She dabbed a cool cloth on his forehead, trying to alleviate his shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice husky. "I should have known better." She shook her head. "No, they exploited your condition. You're not to blame." A wave of indignation flared through her, fueling her protective instincts. The phone call warnings had proven disturbingly accurate. Lucas was a target even within these supposedly safe walls. He closed his eyes, a sheen of tears threatening to break free. I can't even trust the hospital staff. How am I supposed to—" Isabella leaned in, speaking softly. "We'll strengthen security. Dr. Fowler is contacting the board. We'll lock your room if we must. No unauthorized personnel. No one gets near you without verification. You survived one attempt. You'll survive the next." His gaze flickered to her, full of gratitude and fear. Then he whispered, "Just don't leave." "I won't," she vowed. And this time she truly meant never to let him out of her sight. As the dawn began to break outside the windows, painting a pale glow over the hospital grounds, the staff bustled around room 417, ensuring every door, visitor's badge, and corridor was under scrutiny. The memory of the hooded stranger, slipping away into the depths of the hospital, lingered in Isabella's mind. This was clearly just the beginning. The saboteur could be part of a larger conspiracy, and Lucas's greatest enemies might still be out there scheming. Yet, for this fleeting moment, Isabella focused on the steady rise and fall of Lucas's chest, the warmth of his hand in hers, and the fact that he was still alive, still here to fight another day. And in that fragile space between fear and hope, a fierce resolution took hold of her. She would protect him at all costs, even if it meant stepping beyond the boundaries of her nursing duties. Because in ways she couldn't quite express, she believed his life was tied to hers now, their destinies woven together by fate and by a gentle midnight kiss that sparked more than just his consciousness. It sparked a bond neither of them expected, and neither of them would willingly relinquish. The first rays of morning light filtered through the tall windows of St. Aurelia Hospital, lending a deceptively peaceful glow to the aftermath of the night's events. The entire 8th floor buzzed with a new kind of tension. Security officials paced the corridors, staff double-checked ID badges at every turn, and a hush of apprehension seemed to permeate the air. In room 417, Isabella watched over Lucas with an unwavering presence. He was pale and exhausted, drifting in and out of a fitful doze, the shock of his near abduction still weighing heavily on him. Every so often his eyes fluttered open, scanning the room warily, as if expecting another hooded stranger to appear at any moment. Dr. Fowler had returned with a team of more senior hospital administrators, each wearing grave expressions. She'd insisted on a full internal security review and called an emergency meeting at dawn to outline new protocols for Lucas's protection. Now, standing near the foot of Lucas's bed, Dr. Fowler introduced the man she'd brought with her, a lean figure in a plain suit, his official ID marking him as Jacob Ross, a private security consultant retained by the hospital board. "I'm placing Mr. Ross in charge of a specialized detail," Dr. Fowler explained, eyeing Lucas sympathetically. "He'll coordinate with our in-house staff to ensure no unauthorized personnel get anywhere near this room. We'll restrict your visitors to only those on a pre-approved list." Lucas looked up, wincing slightly as he shifted against the pillows. The bruised temple from last night's scuffle still throbbed. "Fine," he murmured, voice gravelly. "I appreciate the caution." Jacob Ross inclined his head. "We'll keep our presence discreet. Our goal isn't to cause undue panic," he said, glancing around the room. "But I do need your cooperation, Mr. Montgomery. If you sense anything suspicious or if someone tries to contact you with instructions that haven't been cleared by Dr. Fowler or Nurse White, let me know immediately." Lucas nodded. Agreed. His gaze flicked to Isabella, who offered a reassuring smile, though her own nerves remained on edge. When Dr. Fowler stepped away to take a call, Ross turned his attention to Isabella. "I understand you and Miss Gianna were the ones who intervened," he said, his tone professional but not unkind. "I'd like to hear every detail of how that intruder managed to lure Mr. Montgomery out of his room." Isabella swallowed, recalling the memory of the hooded figure, the half-lit corridors. "Lucas told me they came to his bedside with a plausible excuse," she explained softly. "Said it was an urgent imaging request. He believed them because he's not fully familiar with hospital procedures. They guided him down the back stairwell, away from the main routes. That's when we found them." Ross took out a small notepad, jotting quick notes. "So no forced violence initially, just a deception. By the time you arrived, it turned physical?" She nodded. "Yes, though Lucas was too weak to resist much. It all happened so quietly that our normal hallway cameras didn't pick it up. They knew the blind spots." Ross's mouth set in a thin line. "So it was well planned. This person must have studied our layout. We'll need to review staff logs, see if anyone new or unaccounted for was on shift." He slid the notepad back into his jacket. "Thank you, Nurse White. We'll be adding cameras where possible and placing a guard just outside this door. Meanwhile, keep a close watch. If you receive more suspicious calls or messages, report it to me or Dr. Fowler immediately." Isabella agreed, feeling a wave of relief that at least now they had a formal security presence. Still, a niggling doubt in her mind wondered if Ross or any official measure could truly stop an inside conspiracy. As the morning wore on, the staff enforced tighter restrictions around Lucas's room. Normally, St. Aurelia allowed families to visit at reasonable hours, but now, the hallway to room 417 was blocked by a temporary partition and a sign that read, "Authorized personnel only." A uniformed guard, hand-picked by Ross, stood watch, questioning anyone who approached. In between checks on Lucas, Isabella handled her other duties, though her focus was never far from him. She and Gianna alternated patrolling the corridor, scanning for any suspicious faces. The entire wing seemed on high alert, and the hospital's overhead announcements had a sharper edge, as though everyone expected further turmoil. Around mid-morning, the elevator doors at the far end of the hall opened, revealing Emmett Montgomery, flanked by two men in business-casual attire. They carried briefcases and wore the unreadable expressions of corporate fixers. Emmett's gaze landed on the newly placed guard and the roped-off corridor. He approached, tension radiating from his posture. "I'm here to see my brother," Emmett announced in a clipped tone. He glared at the guard, who checked a clipboard. "You should already have me on that pre-approved list," he added, voice dripping with sarcasm. The guard nodded slowly. "Your name is here, yes. But mind that I'll be accompanying you. Only one of your associates may enter with you. The other can wait in the lounge." Emmett's lip curled in faint irritation, but he complied. One man stayed behind, while Emmett and the other stepped forward. The guard escorted them down the hall, stopping at Lucas's door. Isabella, who had overheard from a distance, hurried to intercept them before they walked in unannounced. "Mr. Montgomery," she greeted Emmett formally, though her voice held a note of caution. "Lucas had a difficult night. Please keep it brief." Emmett's eyes narrowed, scanning her as if to gauge her loyalty. "Difficult night?" he echoed, feigning ignorance. "Care to explain?" Isabella's mouth pressed into a firm line. She disliked how Emmett pretended to be out of the loop. He rarely missed any detail. "Someone tried to force Lucas out of his room. The hospital is investigating," she replied pointedly. Emmett's brows rose, a flicker of what might have been genuine surprise crossing his face. "Is that so? Well then, by all means I should see him." Without further discussion, he pushed past, opening the door and stepping in. Inside, Lucas lay propped up in bed, an IV drip attached to his left arm, oxygen cannula still in place. He looked up as Emmett entered, the wariness in his eyes deepening. Isabella followed, standing near the bedside to monitor the exchange. Emmett's companion hung back by the wall, scanning the room as though searching for hidden microphones. "Lucas," Emmett began, offering a careful smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard you were in some sort of trouble last night. How are you feeling now?" Lucas's gaze flicked between his brother and the second man. "I'm alive," he replied curtly. "Who's this?" "James," Emmett said, gesturing offhandedly. "A legal assistant from the firm. We have documents for you to review once you're up for it." Lucas let out a subdued scoff. "Documents, the last thing I need right now." He shifted, clearly in pain from the abrupt movement. James, the supposed legal assistant, stepped forward. "I understand, Mr. Montgomery, but certain matters of Montgomery Enterprises require your signature. Some are time-sensitive regarding corporate authorizations." Isabella suppressed a flare of annoyance. How could they possibly expect Lucas to deal with corporate formalities while he lay in a hospital bed after a second attempt on his life? She watched Lucas's expression waver between contempt and resignation. "Fine," he said, sounding beaten down. "Leave them with Isabella. I'll get to it when I can." Emmett's carefully shaped eyebrows drew together. "We'd really prefer you look at them personally, but—" "You heard him," Isabella interjected, stepping in. "Mr. Montgomery is under medical orders to avoid stress. If you'd like to leave the papers for him to review later, I can keep them safe until Dr. Fowler says he's ready." Her calm, courteous tone nonetheless carried a protective edge. Emmett regarded her, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "Very well," he answered, rummaging in his briefcase to retrieve a sheaf of documents, which he passed to Isabella. His voice hardened. "See to it that he reads them soon." We can't afford indefinite delays. Lucas's face twisted with pain as he adjusted himself in bed, the movement tugging at his injuries. I'll read them, he snapped quietly. But do not pressure me. I just survived a second attempt on my life. Maybe you should care about that. Emmett offered a thin-lipped smile. Of course, your health is our priority, but the company can't grind to a halt. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. Lucas, if you recall any detail that might identify who orchestrated this attack, I hope you'll share it. For all we know, the same people might target the company next. Lucas's jaw tightened. I said I'll let you know. A tense silence followed. Isabella sensed the barbed undercurrent, Emmett fishing for clues, Lucas refusing to trust him. Eventually, Emmett took a step back. All right, he said stiffly. We won't stay. Rest, brother. With that, he turned to leave. James followed, handing Isabella one last pointed look, as though to say, Don't stand in our way. Once the door closed behind them, the tension in the room seemed to lift, replaced by Lucas's palpable anger. He exhaled shakily, closing his eyes. It never ends, he muttered. Even with someone trying to kill me, Emmett only cares about business, and I can't tell if he's behind it or just capitalizing on it. Isabella set the documents aside on a rolling tray. I can hold on to these until you're ready, she said quietly, not wanting him to feel forced. Then gently, she approached his bedside. Are you in pain? Need more medication? He shook his head lightly, though his face showed strain. Not yet. Just stay. His voice dropped. I can't stand being alone right now. Every time the door opens, I wonder if it's another trick. Her heart constricted. I'll stay, she promised again, pulling the chair closer to the bed. She settled in, letting her hand rest lightly on the bed's edge. But you should consider letting the police get more involved. The hospital security is a bandage, not a cure. And if Emmett's pressuring you about corporate issues, it might be time to bring official investigators in. Lucas's gaze drifted to the side, uncertain. I agree, but I need proof. If I accuse Emmett or someone else in the company and I'm wrong, I could sabotage everything. Also, the real culprit might slip away. He stopped, grappling with frustration. It's complicated. Isabella nodded. She had no illusions about the complexities of corporate power struggles. She'd glimpsed them in the rumors swirling around Lucas's coma. At least let me see if we can get a detective assigned specifically to your case, a trusted officer. Maybe Dr. Fowler knows someone reputable we can bring into the loop discreetly. He weighed the suggestion, then nodded wearily. Yes, that might be a start. She made a mental note to discuss it with Dr. Fowler. Maybe it was time to approach the local police precinct's detective squad. The attempts on Lucas's life had escalated beyond a simple sabotage rumor. It was now a matter of life and death in a hospital meant to preserve life. Outside, the overhead lights in the corridor glowed a bright midday hue, and the hush of the morning had been replaced by the routine bustle of staff. But in Lucas's room, none of it felt routine. Tension coiled in the air, fear that at any moment another ruse might take him from his bed. Sitting quietly beside him, Isabella recognized a shift in her own emotions. She wasn't merely fulfilling a nurse's duty, she was actively, almost fiercely protecting him, and he clung to her presence with a desperation that transcended the typical patient-caregiver relationship. Every exchange of eye contact, every hushed conversation reaffirmed a bond formed by the spark of that midnight kiss and the common need to shield him from danger. Eventually, Lucas's exhaustion caught up and he let his eyes close. Isabella watched the tension ease from his features bit by bit, the medication and the draining stress pulling him into uneasy sleep. She rose to dim the lights, ensuring the door was locked. Then, collecting the stack of documents Emmett had left, she quietly flipped through them. Her knowledge of corporate lingo was limited, but from the official seals and the multiple sign here tabs, She could see they were urgent deals or amendments requiring Lucas's signature, possibly the final pieces of some major business move. Her fingers paused over one page that referenced a potential shift in the company's board seats. Emmett's name cropped up, along with a mention of temporary delegation of power. Isabella frowned. Was this the legal route by which Emmett hoped to seize more control under the guise of a health crisis? She carefully placed the documents back together. If Lucas needed them, she wouldn't stand in his way. But she felt a pang of suspicion toward Emmett's timing. The day wore on with no further intrusions. A nurse's aide delivered a lunch tray, though Lucas barely touched the food. Dr. Fowler returned periodically, checking vitals and quietly remarking on how well security was responding. She also mentioned that the hospital's senior administrators were considering full police involvement, but that it remained a delicate matter. Isabella lingered through her shift and beyond, ignoring her own fatigue. Each time Lucas roused from his restless dozing, she offered him water, checked his bandages, or simply gave him a reassuring look. Outside, the plainclothes guard rotated with another at the designated interval, and Jacob Ross reappeared occasionally to confirm that no suspicious individuals had tried the corridor. The hospital staff seemed to breathe easier, but Isabella couldn't shake the sense of a larger threat looming just out of sight. Toward early evening, as the overhead lights dimmed to mimic dusk, Lucas awoke with a slight start, eyes darting around until they landed on her. "I thought you might have left," he admitted, voice scratchy. Her heart twinged. "I told you I wouldn't," she said simply, placing a gentle hand on his forearm. He exhaled, relaxing back onto the pillows. Then, in the soft hush that followed, he confided, "I keep seeing that moment on the yacht, someone telling me to turn the engine on, hearing a sudden hiss, then a roar. And now, last night, that hallway. I feel so trapped in my own skin. I can't do anything to protect myself." Isabella swallowed, feeling his vulnerability. "You're recovering. Soon you'll be stronger. For now, trust me and the team. We won't let anything happen to you." He closed his eyes, as if her words offered a momentary balm. "It's just that everything I built, everything I believed about my circle, it's shattered. I don't know who's behind this, but I can't rule out Emmett or others. Maybe friends I've known for years. Sometimes I wonder if I was a terrible judge of character, or if greed can twist even loyal people." She didn't know how to respond. Instead, she let the silence hold them together, a quiet testament to the precarious path ahead. The hospital's beep of machines lulled in the background, and for a heartbeat, Isabella considered gently placing a hand over his. Yet she hesitated, mindful that lines of professional decorum still existed, even if they felt blurred by the circumstances. Eventually, Dr. Fowler entered, stepping lightly to avoid startling him. She performed a brief check of his IV lines and scanned his vitals on the overhead monitor. Satisfied, she turned to them both. "I've spoken with a detective friend at the local precinct," she said in a low voice. "I'll arrange for a preliminary interview if you're willing, Lucas. They can come quietly, off the record at first, to gather information." Lucas mustered a nod, though tension shadowed his eyes. "Yes, that might be best. No formal statements yet, but I'll talk to them." Dr. Fowler nodded, relief softening her features. Then she glanced at Isabella. "Go home soon, please," she urged. "Get some proper rest. I appreciate your dedication, but you're going to collapse if you keep this up." Lucas's gaze flickered to Isabella, a trace of alarm. It was as if the thought of her leaving, even for a short while, unsettled him. But Isabella forced a small smile. "I will," she promised Dr. Fowler. "Just a bit longer." Dr. Fowler sighed but yielded, stepping out after making a few more notes. When she was gone, Lucas looked at Isabella apologetically. "I know you've been here too long. Don't let me—" She shook her head firmly, a gentle smile on her lips. "I'll leave when I'm sure you're settled for the night." And when the detective schedule is set, I'll come back fresh and ready. Deal?" His shoulders eased. "Deal." A tentative calm settled in the room once more. Outside, the pastel hues of evening gave way to the deeper blues of nighttime. Overhead lighting in the corridor dimmed, signaling the end of standard visiting hours. The hush returned, punctuated by an occasional phone ringing at the nurse's station or a cart rattling past. Isabella watched as Lucas sank into a doze again, exhaustion claiming him. She stayed close in case he stirred or panicked, and in those quiet moments, she found her thoughts drifting to her own life, how drastically it had changed in just a matter of days. She'd once believed her job was to mend wounds, administer medication, and offer kind words. Now she was enmeshed in a conspiracy that endangered one of her patients, a man whose life had become strangely entwined with hers. Even as the corridor lights dimmed further, she could not quell the persistent thrum of vigilance beneath her calm exterior. She knew the calm was fragile. The hospital's new security measures were helpful, but if the saboteurs had found one way to breach them before, they might find another. An unspoken vow lodged itself in her chest. She would protect Lucas, no matter how high the stakes climbed, because in doing so she felt she was protecting something rare. Trust, courage, perhaps even love sprouting in the shadows of danger. Eventually her gaze fell upon his face, peaceful in slumber. The overhead monitor ticked out his steady vitals. She let her eyes close just for a few seconds, her body urging for rest. But she refused to slip too deeply into sleep. Not when the shadows outside could still harbor threat. Not when Lucas's enemies lay in wait. For now, she would stand between them and him, quietly, resolutely, determined to see him through this ordeal, no matter how dark the night became. A dull sky loomed outside St. Aurelia Hospital's windows, early dawn battling through heavy clouds. The air felt thick with the promise of rain, a humid weight pressing on the city. Inside room 417, the hush of a new day arrived with a subdued tension. Security personnel changing shifts, monitors beeping faintly, and the faint echo of housekeeping carts rolling through the halls. Lucas stirred from a restless sleep, blinking away the remnants of uneasy dreams. Each shift of his injured body sent pangs of pain through his torso, reminding him that it had only been a few days since he emerged from the coma. He groaned, then took a moment to gather himself, breathing shallowly. This morning, like so many now, brought the realization that the safe world he once believed in no longer existed. Enemies lurked, disguised as allies. He was trapped in a hospital bed, reliant on others to protect him. As he blinked in the grayish daylight, he noticed Isabella seated by the window, reading from a small notepad. She lifted her gaze when she sensed his motion, a warm, hopeful smile reaching her eyes. "Morning," she greeted softly. "How are you feeling?" He managed a shrug, half winced at the discomfort. "Better than last night," he said, forcing a faint grin. "I guess that's progress." In truth, every morning since his second brush with danger had been a test of resilience. Lucas still couldn't quite piece together the identity of the hooded figure who nearly abducted him, and doubts gnawed at his confidence. Isabella stood and drew closer. "Your vital signs look stable," she reported, glancing at the monitors. "Dr. Fowler wants to do another set of scans later, just to make sure nothing was aggravated by the incident." He nodded, recalling how the intruder had jerked him down that lonely corridor. His burns felt tender, bruises from the mishandling forming under the bandages. Swallowing, he tried to shift his thoughts away from the memory. "And the detective?" he asked, voice husky. "Did Dr. Fowler set something up?" Isabella's expression brightened. "Yes. Detective Rainey from the local precinct. She's due to arrive this morning, off record as we discussed. She wants to hear your account of both incidents. Figure out if there's a pattern." Lucas breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Finally, some official involvement. That's good. Maybe she can help. A gentle knock at the door interrupted them. Outside stood Gianna, carrying a tray of breakfast, soft scrambled eggs, toast, and juice, alongside a small array of medication cups. She offered a polite smile and entered after receiving a nod from the security guard posted in the corridor. "Morning, Lucas," Gianna said as she set the tray on the rolling table near his bed. "We're trying a normal diet today, if you can handle it. If it's too much, let us know." He eyed the food as though it were an alien concept, but hunger stirred in his stomach. Slowly, with Isabella's help, he raised the bed's angle so he could eat in a more upright position. Gripping the fork in his bandaged hand, he took a tentative bite of eggs, grimacing a little, still adjusting to normal food after weeks of IV fluids and bland hospital fare. Gianna handed Isabella the medication cups. "Here's the morning dose, pain management plus your standard antibiotic to ward off infection. Dr. Fowler also added a mild anti-anxiety med, given everything." Her tone held genuine compassion. Lucas accepted the medication without protest, swallowing them one by one with sips of juice. "Thanks," he murmured. "I'll leave you two unless you need anything else," Gianna said. Isabella shook her head, watching her colleague exit back into the corridor. Alone with Isabella again, Lucas forced more bites of breakfast, but soon his appetite waned. He set the fork down, hand trembling from fatigue. Isabella moved quietly, helping adjust his pillows and ensuring the rolling table was out of the way. She hesitated, then spoke in a careful tone. "Lucas, I've been thinking. That text message and the phone call I got before the abduction attempt, someone's trying to help you from the shadows. Maybe they're a whistleblower in your company or a close observer who knows how dangerous your enemies are." He nodded thoughtfully, remembering how Isabella had revealed those mysterious warnings. But they didn't show themselves, probably scared. A pang of gratitude flickered in his chest. At least some unknown ally existed somewhere. If Detective Rainey can trace the phone or message somehow, that might give us a lead. She regarded him with calm resolve. "I'll mention it to her. If anyone can discreetly investigate those messages, it's the police." He sighed, letting his head fall back on the pillow. "I hate this feeling, being trapped, having to wait while others do the work. The old me would be out there, pressuring investigators, leveraging contacts. Instead," he gestured at the IV lines trailing into his arm, a bitter note creeping into his voice. Isabella stepped closer, her presence offering a gentle steadiness. "You're healing, Lucas. Soon enough, you'll have that chance. But right now, your body needs you to be still." He exhaled, focusing on the warm empathy in her eyes. It was a comfort he hadn't expected. "Thank you," he said finally, "for staying, for everything." Her cheeks colored slightly. "Just doing my job," she murmured, though they both knew her care went beyond standard protocol. She took hold of his wrist gently, checking his pulse with practiced fingers. "We'll get through this." Mid-morning arrived, and Detective Rainey stepped into room 417. She was a tall woman in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back into a low bun and an air of quiet confidence. Her plainclothes attire, simple blazer, dark slacks, blended seamlessly with the hospital's subdued environment. Dr. Fowler introduced them, then left, giving Lucas a nod of encouragement. Isabella remained by his side, standing quietly while Rainey drew up a chair. The detective offered a reassuring smile. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm glad you agreed to speak with me," she said, her tone measured. "We'd like to keep this conversation informal to start, just gathering facts." Lucas mustered a polite greeting. "Sure, ask what you need." Rainey clicked on a small recorder, placing it between them. "This is Detective Rainey, speaking with Lucas Montgomery at St. Aurelia Hospital off the record regarding recent attempts on his life." She paused. "Please describe in your own words what happened leading up to the yacht explosion." Lucas inhaled, his gaze drifting briefly to Isabella for reassurance before turning back to Rainey. In halting detail, he recounted the night of the explosion, how he'd gone out on his yacht late, a routine sail to clear his head, a vague recollection of receiving a call or message from someone urging him to inspect the boat personally. He remembered stepping aboard, hearing a voice instruct him to switch on the engine. Then the catastrophic blast. His memory blurred, but he insisted it wasn't a mere accident. Someone orchestrated it. Rainey listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Was there a particular reason someone would want you incapacitated? Financial deals? Family inheritance issues? Lucas's jaw tightened. A dozen potential reasons, he said wearily. I was finalizing a massive venture that threatened to shake up certain markets. Or maybe it's a family power grab. My stepbrother Emmett stands to gain if I'm out of the picture. Or a competitor. Montgomery Enterprises has plenty of rivals. He shook his head, frustration evident. It's like casting a net into a sea of sharks. Rainey made careful notes. So no single prime suspect leaps out? Lucas hesitated. I can't name just one without proof. Emmett's actions are suspicious, but so might be others in my circle. He looked to Isabella, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. Guilt over suspecting his own brother, despite their rocky history. Rainey seemed to register that tension. All right. Now, about the second incident here at the hospital. Tell me exactly what happened that night. He recounted how someone in a hooded sweatshirt told him there was an urgent scan, leading him away from his room, down a back stairwell. Isabella jumped in to describe how she and Gianna found him, the intruder fleeing upon being confronted. Rainey's eyes sharpened. Do you recall anything about their voice, height, or any distinguishing features? Lucas closed his eyes, replaying the memory. They whispered, mumbled, might have been trying to hide their accent. Medium height, slender build, but strong enough to support my weight. That's it. Rainey nodded, her expression grave. Understood. We'll check hospital security footage, though I know it's lacking in certain areas. We'll also run background checks on staff and visitors from that night. She eyed Isabella. I was informed you received a threatening text or call prior. Could I see that? Isabella had anticipated the request. She retrieved her phone and showed Rainey the cryptic text and recounted the phone conversation with a male voice urging her to keep Lucas safe. Rainey jotted down details, promising to run a trace if possible. Likely a burner phone, but we'll see, she commented. The detective wrapped up her questions shortly after, thanking them. I appreciate your cooperation. I'll keep this low profile for now, but if we find anything concrete, we'll need an official statement. If either of you recall more details, call me anytime. She handed Lucas her card, then left quietly. Lucas slumped back, fatigue washing over him. Isabella sensed his relief at having told someone in law enforcement, but also a tinge of lingering anxiety. What if they can't find anything? He murmured. All these leads might be dead ends. Isabella placed a comforting hand on his arm. Don't lose hope. Detective Rainey seemed sharp. At least you've got someone looking beyond the hospital walls. He nodded, though the lines of worry remained etched in his forehead. Afternoon brought more rain clouds, a steady patter against the windows. While Lucas napped, Isabella ventured out to grab a snack from the cafeteria, her first proper break in hours. Even while pouring coffee into a paper cup, her mind lingered on Lucas's predicament. The detective's calm competence had relieved some of her fear, but this feeling of shadowy threats remained, like a phantom trailing her every step. Clutching her coffee, she found Gianna tidying up at the nurse's station. They exchanged weary smiles. Long day, huh? Gianna commented, leaning on the counter. Isabella nodded, taking a cautious sip of the hot brew. Every day since he woke up feels like an eternity. The detective came, asked her questions. Lucas was honest, but we still have no tangible evidence. Gianna frowned. It's horrifying, imagining someone willing to kill him right under our noses. But I heard Dr. Fowler say the board is considering bringing in off-duty police or specialized security to guard the entire wing. We'll turn this place into a fortress if we must. Isabella exhaled, feeling a knot in her chest loosen slightly. A fortress might be the only way. She paused, glancing at her watch. I should head back soon. Can't leave him alone for long. Gianna nodded. Of course, take care of yourself too, though. Promising she would, Isabella returned upstairs. She approached room 417, noticing Jacob Ross, the private security consultant, in quiet conversation with the posted guard. He gave her a professional nod. Everything calm inside? Isabella nodded. Lucas was resting. I stepped out for a break. Ross checked a note on his phone. Good. Keep an eye on any visitors. We'll do the same. Inside, she found Lucas awake, eyes fixed on the drizzling rain outside. He glanced at her, relief crossing his features. Did you get some coffee? He asked, voice tinged with concern. She nodded, smiling. I did. How are you holding up? He pursed his lips, wishing I could just walk out of here and handle my affairs directly, but I still feel like a prisoner in my own skin. Her heart squeezed. She stepped closer to the bed. Focus on recovery, Lucas. Every day, you're getting stronger. His eyes softened. I know, and having you around helps, more than you realize. There was a sincerity in his tone that made her cheeks warm. Before she could respond, the overhead lights flickered, just a brief interruption in the hospital's power. Both of them glanced up, startled. Then it stabilized. Lucas exhaled, shaking his head. Even a flicker makes me jump now, he said ruefully. She reached out, lightly covering his hand with hers. That's normal, given what you've been through. For a moment, they remained in gentle silence, the hospital's white noise of machines and distant pages forming a backdrop. Isabella felt the fragile closeness between them, the tension of attraction wreathed with the gravity of their circumstances. She remembered that night, the quiet plea for him to come back, the soft kiss on his forehead. Though she'd known it was unorthodox, the weight of that moment still reverberated in her. Lucas gently turned his hand beneath hers, fingers hooking around hers in a light grip. I owe you an apology, he murmured. Before all this, I wasn't exactly known as a kind man. My business tactics, the way I pushed people. Maybe I deserved some enemies, but you've been unwaveringly kind, and I'm sorry for how my life's troubles have spilled onto you. Isabella's throat constricted. She shook her head gently. I'm here by choice. Your troubles, well, they're not your fault. Everyone deserves help when they need it most. He watched her with gratitude that needed no words. Then he let go, slowly leaning back against the pillow. A subtle flush colored his cheeks, and Isabella felt her own heart flutter in response. The line between nurse and patient was undeniably blurring. Yet for now, they shared a mutual understanding. Survival first, hearts second. The rain intensified as the evening stretched on, droplets hammering the glass. Dr. Fowler arrived after dinner, guiding a couple of technicians who'd come to perform a fresh set of scans on Lucas's injuries. The team worked methodically, helping him onto a stretcher for transport to the imaging department. Isabella hovered protectively, ensuring the assigned security guard accompanied them. Throughout the short trip, Lucas's tension was visible. He gripped the side rails of the stretcher, refusing to let it move unless Isabella was at his side. She complied, gently coaching him to breathe. The corridor lights flickered overhead in steady patterns, and the smell of antiseptics clung to every corner. In the imaging suite, the technician asked Isabella to wait just outside the scanning room while they positioned Lucas. She stood near the door, arms folded, senses sharp, ignoring the dryness in her throat. Eventually the process ended, and she re-entered to help reposition Lucas. The scans looked promising. No new severe injuries, only bruises. Dr. Fowler let out a relieved sigh. On the way back to the room, Lucas's stretcher rolled slowly, guided by an orderly. Isabella walked on one side, a security guard on the other. She glimpsed Emmett's associate James, lingering near the elevator bank with a phone in hand, though he didn't attempt to approach. Her chest tightened. Clearly, Emmett was still circling, waiting for the chance to push legal documents or glean more info. Safely back in room 417, they got Lucas settled again. Dr. Fowler checked him over, declared he looked stable and advised rest. Isabella could tell from his drawn expression that the day's exertion left him drained. She quietly thanked the staff, then locked the door after them. When she turned, she found Lucas watching her with a weariness that tugged at her heart. "Thank you," he whispered, half-lidded eyes on her, "for everything." She managed a small, reassuring smile, moving to dim the lights. "Try to sleep," she murmured, slipping onto the chair beside him. "I'll stay as long as I can." He didn't protest, simply closed his eyes with a soft exhale. As the machines around them beeped softly in time, Isabella reflected on how ordinary it would all appear to an outsider. A hospital room, a patient resting, a nurse by his side. Yet beneath that veneer lay a fortress of heightened security, a swirl of conspiracies, and the fragile threads of trust binding them together. Outside, thunder grumbled and rain lashed the windows, matching the roiling storm of emotions churning in her chest. She brushed her fingertips over the bandages on Lucas's arm, checking their adherence. He stirred, not quite awake, but not fully asleep, instinctively turning toward her touch. In a few hours, her shift would end again, and the cycle of cautious vigilance would continue. But in that quiet, rain-soaked moment, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that the detective's investigation would uncover a lead. Hope that Lucas would eventually stand on his own 2 feet, free from these shackles of fear. And hope that someday, when the threat passed, they might remember these hours not just as a nightmare, but as the start of something more. A bond forged by crisis and tempered by genuine care. He let out a soft breath, and she realized he'd fallen asleep, lulled by the soft patter of rain and her presence. Gently, she brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, feeling protective in a way she never had with any other patient. If fate had placed her in this position, she would not falter. She would see him safe, no matter what shadows prowled these halls. And as she sat there, listening to the lullaby of the storm, she silently vowed, "Let them come, whoever they are. They will not take Lucas Montgomery again." She would stand guard against the darkness until the rising sun burned away every lingering threat. Rain still pelted the windows of St. Aurelia Hospital when Isabella woke from a light doze in the chair beside Lucas's bed. She blinked, momentarily unsure of the time, until the faint gray light outside indicated early morning. The overhead fluorescents were at their lowest setting, granting the room a muted calm. A soft groan drew her attention. Lucas lay with his brow furrowed, his breath coming in shallow gusts as he fought the edge of pain. The activity of the previous day, scans, new bandages, lingering tensions, had left him visibly drained. Isabella instinctively reached for the small button that regulated his IV pain medication, pressing it gently to administer a safe, doctor-approved dose. His eyes flickered open, locking onto hers. Even half awake, he seemed to recognize her, and a trace of relief crossed his features. "Mornin'," he rasped, grimacing as he cleared his throat. Isabella leaned forward. "How do you feel?" His gaze slid toward the bandages on his arms and the tightness around his rib cage. "Like I lost a battle," he murmured wryly, "but a bit less like I'm losing the war." She smiled, the smallest motion softening her fatigue. "That's something. Did you manage to get some rest?" He nodded. "Not too many nightmares this time." He flexed his fingers experimentally, then let out a quiet sigh. "The real world's bad enough, though." Before she could respond, There was a light knock at the door. The uniformed guard, this shift's posted sentinel, poked his head in. "Morning, nurse. Just wanted to check if either of you needs anything. The night's been quiet." Isabella shook her head in polite thanks, and the guard nodded, stepping out. Lucas exhaled a slow breath. At least no intruders this time. The mention of intruders brought a reminder of the precariousness of his situation. Even if last night had passed without incident, the threat remained. Isabella rose, smoothing the wrinkles from her scrubs. "I'll fetch you some breakfast. Dr. Fowler wants you to try more solid foods again. Keep your strength up." He watched her, concern flickering in his eyes. "You look more tired than me. Are you sure you're okay?" Her cheeks warmed at his unexpected worry. "I'm fine. A little rest here and there. The staff is rotating extra help, so I'm not alone." Lucas nodded, though he still appeared unconvinced. She stepped into the corridor. The faint scent of disinfectant greeted her, accompanied by the low hum of overhead lights. Several staff members bustled about, beginning their shifts. A pair of orderlies pushed a supply cart, and 2 nurses reviewed a whiteboard that tracked patient statuses. The guard from outside Lucas's door gave her a friendly nod. In the small pantry nearby, Isabella collected a tray of breakfast items. As she poured a glass of water, Dr. Fowler arrived, scanning the hallway with a purposeful stride. Spotting Isabella, she approached. "How is he this morning?" Isabella balanced the tray carefully. "Better. Less pain, though still tired." Dr. Fowler offered a warm, professional smile. "I'll check on him shortly. Detective Rainey sent an update overnight. No breakthroughs yet, but they're compiling a suspect list based on your descriptions. Also, our admin is doubling down on ID checks for staff. No one gets near Lucas without clearance." Isabella felt a ripple of relief at the news, though she could sense Dr. Fowler's underlying caution. "Thanks," she said softly. "He'll be glad to hear the detective's not forgetting him." They parted ways. Isabella returned to room 417, carefully balancing the tray. She found Lucas sitting more upright, wincing but determined. She set the tray on the table beside him. "Breakfast is served," she said, attempting a light-hearted tone. He managed a half-smile. "Could use some coffee, but I'm guessing that's off-limits with my current meds." She chuckled, picking up a piece of toast and tearing it into smaller bits he could handle without straining. "We'll see about decaf eventually. But for now, let's start slow." Mid-morning arrived, bringing a subdued bustle to the hallway. Gianna popped in to help Isabella with Lucas's daily check, replacing IV fluid bags, verifying bandages. Lucas endured their ministrations with stoic patience, gritting his teeth only when the cleaning of a wound stretched tender skin. Through it all, Isabella noticed he rarely complained, perhaps too aware that complaining changed nothing. As they finished, a knock at the door caused them all to pause. The guard outside announced, "Detective Rainey is here, alone." Lucas nodded for them to let her in. Detective Rainey stepped inside, wearing the same professional attire as before, a blazer over a neat blouse. She carried a slim folder under one arm. "Morning," she greeted. Then, glancing at Gianna and Isabella, she nodded politely. "I hope it's okay if I speak with Mr. Montgomery again?" Lucas gestured toward an empty chair. "Go ahead. Did you find anything new?" Rainey sat, opening the folder. "We reviewed the phone records for that number Nurse White provided. As expected, it's a burner, disconnected hours after the call. But we did catch a faint lead. Someone purchased that SIM card from a small convenience store a few miles away, paying in cash. The store's CCTV is abysmal, but we're trying to enhance it." Isabella exchanged a hopeful glance with Lucas. It was at least some progress. Rainey turned a page. "Regarding your staff and visitors, we're cross-checking the night of your second incident with hospital IDs. So far, no major red flags, though we have a few anomalies. A staff pass got swiped through a locked door around 2 a.m., but the nurse assigned that pass claims it was stolen from her cart." Lucas's brow furrowed. So someone used a stolen ID to get around. That means they planned it carefully. Rainey nodded. Likely so. We also have a partial footprint in the stairwell that doesn't match standard hospital shoes. We're running comparisons, but it's not guaranteed to yield results. He sighed. Still, that's something. Any word about my brother Emmett? Rainey flipped another page. We've placed a discreet watch on him and a few associates, but he's done nothing suspicious since last visiting you. Spent most of his time in corporate offices and was seen dining with potential investors last night. Of course, none of that rules him out. She paused, meeting Lucas's gaze steadily. We'll keep digging. Meanwhile, keep your guard up. Let us know if anything else surfaces. Calls, messages, visitors. Lucas nodded. Thank you. With a brisk but polite farewell, Rainey left, leaving a mix of relief and frustration in her wake. Lucas stared at the closed door. They're trying, but it's all so slow, he muttered, gripping the bed railing. Isabella rested a hand on his arm. Investigations take time, but they have leads now. You're not forgotten. He exhaled, tension lining his jaw. Feels like I'm living in limbo. The rest of the day passed in measured quiet. Outside, the rain gave way to a brooding, overcast sky, the wind picking up in gusts. Hospital staff, under the watchful eyes of security, rotated in with fresh supplies and more thorough ID checks than usual. Several times, Emmett's assistant, James, hovered near the corridor, presumably hoping to drop off more documents or glean insights, but the guard shooed him away, citing Lucas's rest orders. Around mid-afternoon, Lucas finally requested that Isabella hand him the sheaf of papers Emmett had left days ago. She helped him prop up on pillows, carefully setting the documents on his lap. Are you sure you're up for this? She asked, concerned. Dr. Fowler wanted limited stress. He managed a determined nod. I need to see what's so urgent that Emmett's sending his lackeys. Could be a clue, or maybe it's just standard business. She hovered nearby, respecting his space. Lucas scanned the first few pages, brow creasing. Company reorganization proposals, changes to certain board seats, something about transferring voting rights if I'm incapacitated. His lips thinned. So that's it. Emmett's pushing for a temporary delegation of my authority. Under these terms, he'd have nearly full control of Montgomery Enterprises if I'm unable to fulfill my executive duties. Isabella felt a wave of anger on his behalf. He's capitalizing on your injuries, she said softly, trying to secure a legal path to power. Lucas nodded grimly. Looks that way, but I don't see direct evidence linking him to the attempts on my life. He might just be opportunistic. He flipped another page, then halted. Wait, this clause. It references an existing threat assessment, claiming I might remain in a vegetative state. This was dated right before I woke up from the coma. His anger flared. He was preparing to take over while I was still unconscious, presumably for the good of the company. The bitterness in his tone was unmistakable. Isabella gently took the pages from him when she saw his hands start to shake. Let's not push your blood pressure too high, she whispered. He closed his eyes, breathing unevenly. And the worst part is, maybe it would have been easier if I never woke. The statement came out in a hollow murmur, weighed down by betrayal and exhaustion. Isabella's heart tightened. She set aside the papers and sat at the edge of his bed. Don't say that. You're here, alive. That means you can fight back, can reclaim your life. She placed a tentative hand on his shoulder, offering comfort. He opened his eyes to meet hers, raw emotion gleaming in them. I'm just so tired. Tired of not knowing who orchestrated this. Tired of suspecting my own brother or a so-called friend. Tired of fear. Her gentle hand moved upward, a reassuring pressure against the curve of his neck. That's precisely why you must keep going. Every day you heal is one day closer to confronting whoever's behind this. He nodded, the corners of his mouth tugging down as though he might cry but refused to let it happen. I'm not giving up, he whispered, not with you here. The silence that followed was thick with emotion, an unspoken understanding that their connection had grown past the confines of nurse and patient. He clasped her hand just for a moment, letting the warmth linger before exhaling and pulling back. Evening shadows lengthened, the hospital lights switching over to a softer glow. Isabella helped Lucas with his scheduled wound care, carefully peeling away old bandages to inspect the slow healing of his burns. Each dressing change stung, but he bore it stoically, occasionally hissing through clenched teeth. She murmured reassuring words, skillfully applying antiseptic and fresh gauze. By the time she finished, beads of sweat dotted his forehead. "There," she said, disposing of the soiled materials. "All set. I'll get you a fresh gown." Lucas closed his eyes, regaining his breath. "Thank you," he whispered. "I know it's not easy, having to tend to all this." She offered a faint smile. "It's why I'm here." But in her chest, she felt the deeper meaning. She wasn't just his nurse now. She was a confidant, a guardian, maybe something more than that. A subtle knock sounded, and they both looked up anxiously. The door opened to reveal Dr. Fowler, who walked in carrying a new chart. She noticed the tension in the air and gave them a gentle nod. "Am I interrupting?" "No," Lucas said, shifting to sit more upright. "What's the update?" Dr. Fowler flipped a page in her chart. "Your latest blood tests show improvement. White cell count stable, indicating no lingering infection. Your wounds from my inspection are healing as expected." She smiled at Isabella. "Good work on the dressings. Now we need to focus on mobility, physical therapy. A short, supervised walk, maybe tomorrow, if you can manage it." Lucas arched a brow. "Walk? I'm barely able to stand." Dr. Fowler nodded sympathetically. "It'll be incremental. A therapist will come by, help you exercise your legs, keep your muscles from atrophying. Even brief sessions can speed recovery." He hesitated, but Isabella sensed a flicker of hope behind his reluctance. The idea of walking even a few steps signaled progress beyond the hospital bed. "All right," he agreed softly. "I'll do it." Dr. Fowler seemed pleased. After a few more remarks about medication adjustments, she paused, dropping her voice. "We're still monitoring security. So far, no suspicious attempts today. But we all know the threat's not gone. Please remain vigilant." Her gaze flicked between Lucas and Isabella meaningfully. They promised to be cautious, and Dr. Fowler departed, leaving the hush of evening to settle again. A few hours later, Gianna arrived to relieve Isabella for a break. "Go grab dinner. Rest your eyes for half an hour," Gianna insisted. "I've got this." Isabella sighed, torn between exhaustion and the urge to remain. But the persistent ache in her own body reminded her that she needed to recharge. She turned to Lucas, who offered a nod of approval. "Go," he said softly. "I'll be okay. Gianna's here." She mustered a gentle smile, feeling a swirl of conflicting emotions. "I won't be long." Exiting the room, she walked down the corridor, heart heavy with the knowledge that stepping away even briefly felt risky. But she knew it was necessary. She couldn't protect him if she was too depleted to think straight. She made her way to a small staff lounge on the same floor. The windows there overlooked the hospital's courtyard, where rain puddles glistened under the flickering lamps. She grabbed a snack from a vending machine, crackers and water, and sank into a worn chair, letting her eyes close for a moment. Images replayed in her mind. Lucas's guarded expression as he spoke to Detective Rainey, the bitterness in his voice when discussing Emmett's takeover documents, the quiet relief he found in her presence. Slowly, she realized how deeply entangled she'd become, not just as his nurse but as a personal ally. Their bond had crossed an invisible line, and although it felt precarious, it also felt undeniably real. A creak of the lounge door startled her. She looked up to see Dr. Fowler slip in, eyebrows raised in concern. "You all right?" Isabella straightened. "Just overwhelmed," she admitted. "Everything about this situation. Someone out there wants Lucas dead, and I'm practically living in his shadow. trying to keep him safe. Dr. Fowler placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. I know, it's a heavy burden, but you're not alone. We have security, the detective, the board, and me, she added, smiling gently. I'm behind you every step of the way. Isabella felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but blinked them back. Thank you. It's just, I never expected to care this much. He's more than a patient now. Her voice was barely above a whisper. The doctor's expression softened. I can see that. Sometimes these bonds form when life and death hang in the balance. My advice is to stay honest with yourself and remember your boundaries, but also don't shut out your compassion. It's your greatest strength. Isabella nodded, absorbing the words, feeling both comforted and apprehensive about how far her heart had already ventured. After a short break, she returned to room 417, re-energized, if only slightly. Gianna was chatting quietly with Lucas, who looked more relaxed. They both glanced up as Isabella entered. I'll leave you two, Gianna said, offering Isabella a meaningful look before stepping out. Lucas patted the bed's edge, beckoning Isabella closer. She complied, stopping at his side. He studied her face, concern etched on his own. You okay? You look less tense. She managed a small laugh. You think I look less tense? Her shoulders eased fractionally. I feel better, yes. He nodded, shifting carefully to relieve pressure on his bandaged side. I asked Gianna how you're doing. She said you barely left my room. You have a life outside this hospital, you know. She shrugged gently, mindful not to downplay the seriousness of his condition. I do. But right now, this is where I need to be. I've told the staff I can handle extra shifts. His eyes flickered with gratitude, then something close to yearning. Thank you, he repeated, voice taut with emotion. I can't do this alone. The closeness of the moment made the room feel smaller, the hush more intimate. Isabella reached for his hand, allowing herself that gesture. Their fingers laced briefly, a silent affirmation. Then she recalled Dr. Fowler's counsel about boundaries. She withdrew her hand, offering a reassuring smile that danced between professional and personal. It's late, she murmured, glancing at the clock, nearing 10 at night. You should try to sleep. He sighed, sinking back into the pillows. You'll be here if I wake? She nodded, her voice gentle. Always. Don't worry. Outside, the corridor lights had dimmed for the evening shift, and the hush resumed its familiar hold on the hospital. Isabella's eyes lingered on Lucas's face as he drifted off, feeling a surge of fierce protectiveness. She had no idea how deep this conspiracy ran, but she knew one certainty. Whoever dared to come after him again would find her in their path. Thunder rumbled in the distance, hinting at another late-night storm. Isabella exhaled, checking the lock on the door and verifying the security guard's presence through the small glass panel. All was still for now. Settling into her chair, she arranged a thin blanket over herself, determined to keep watch through another long night. Her heart pounded softly with each breath. Tomorrow might bring fresh attempts, new revelations, or further anguish. But she refused to yield to the terror that lurked. This unwavering nurse, the one who'd kissed her patient's forehead and whispered him back to life, would stand guard once more. Day by day, they edged closer to uncovering the truth, and as dawn threatened to break again, Isabella hoped that soon the light would banish the shadows of conspiracy for good. A cold, stormy dawn broke over St. Aurelia Hospital, the sky painted in dark purples and blues. Rain lashed the tall windows, providing a steady percussion that echoed through the hushed halls. In room 417, the atmosphere felt both subdued and tense. A sleepless night had left Lucas looking paler than before, and though Isabella had dozed off briefly in the chair at his bedside, the faint circles under her eyes hinted at mounting fatigue. Still, she rose the moment he stirred, instantly alert. The day's routine began with the usual checks, vital signs, wound inspections, and a medication update. Lucas grimaced through the bandage change, pressing his lips together to suppress any cry of pain. In the background, a nurse's aide discreetly swapped out linens and disposed of medical waste. Through it all, Isabella stayed close, murmuring reassurance. "Good," she said softly, when she finished rebandaging a particularly tender spot. "No sign of infection. Everything's healing on schedule." Lucas exhaled, managing a wry smile despite the lingering discomfort. "I feel like a living jigsaw puzzle. Each piece is a bruise or burn." She gently rested her hand on his wrist. "You're mending, little by little." He nodded, his eyes glancing toward the locked door. "And no intruders last night," he noted, relief mingling with caution. "Thankfully, no," Isabella agreed. She stepped back, carefully disposing of her gloves. "Security upped their patrol. I heard them passing by the room every half hour or so." Lucas's expression tightened. "I'm grateful for it, but I hate this fortress feeling." He closed his eyes momentarily, recalling how freedom of movement on his yacht, in his offices, had once defined his life. "Still," he added, opening them again, "I'd rather be caged than at risk of another attempt." Isabella nodded, understanding the complexity of his frustration. Even as he chafed under the heightened security, he needed it. She glanced at the clock. "The physical therapist is due soon, right?" He gave a short sigh. "Yes. Dr. Fowler insisted I try a short walk down the corridor. First steps toward normalcy, I guess." She mustered a small, supportive smile. "I'll be right there with you." An hour later, the physical therapist, a middle-aged man named Miguel, arrived. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a calm, reassuring demeanor. After a brief chat, he gently guided Lucas through basic stretches and leg exercises at the bedside. Isabella stood on the other side, steadying Lucas, while Miguel offered professional instruction. Lucas's first attempt to stand on his own feet nearly ended in collapse. His muscles, weakened by weeks of inactivity, refused to hold him fully. Isabella instinctively grabbed his arm, providing support. He cursed under his breath, clearly frustrated by how frail he felt. "Easy does it," Miguel said firmly. "We'll go step by step." Lucas inhaled, determined. Isabella could feel the tremor in his arms. Slowly, carefully, they helped him maintain balance, each movement deliberate. Sweat beaded on Lucas's forehead, and his jaw tightened with concentration. After a minute or two of standing, he lowered back onto the bed, chest heaving. "That's enough for now," Miguel pronounced. "We'll do short sessions throughout the week. Remember, progress won't be instant, but it will come." Lucas nodded, visibly drained but grateful. Isabella dabbed a cool cloth along his hairline, murmuring encouragement. "You did well," she said, and meant it. Miguel gave a parting nod, promising to return the following day, then left quietly. Exhaling shakily, Lucas leaned back against the pillows. "I never thought standing would feel like running a marathon," he muttered. Isabella smiled softly, brushing stray hair from his forehead. "Your body's rebuilding itself. This is a good start." His eyes flicked to the door. "I just wish we had answers about who did this," he said, voice laced with tension, "so I can focus on healing without looking over my shoulder." The moment he spoke those words, the door opened, accompanied by the guard's sharp voice outside. "I'm sorry. You can't just—" But Emmett Montgomery stepped into the room anyway, adjusting his immaculate suit. He offered a razor-thin smile, seeming immune to the guard's protestations. "Lucas, brother, it's been a few days. How are you faring?" Isabella stiffened, positioning herself protectively near Lucas. Emmett's presence inevitably carried a frosty undercurrent. "He's in therapy," she said, tone measured. "He needs rest." Emmett glanced at her, then back at Lucas. "Is there a limit to how many times I can visit my own brother?" His attempt at a convivial tone sounded hollow. Lucas sighed. "Let him speak," he said quietly. "But keep it short, Emmett. I'm exhausted." Emmett took a few steps closer, smoothing his lapels. "I understand. However, there's an urgent matter we must address. The board requires confirmation about the reorganization proposal. If you refuse or delay your signature, certain deals might collapse." Lucas's jaw clenched. "So you're telling me to sign away my authority while I lie here half dead? That's the gist, isn't it?" Emmett feigned a wounded look. "It's not about stripping your authority. It's about ensuring the company functions. Investors are anxious. But maybe you prefer it to crumble, just to spite me." Anger flared in Lucas's eyes, and Isabella caught her breath. She placed a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder, silently cautioning him not to escalate. "Emmett," she said firmly, "this isn't the time. You're adding stress he doesn't need." Emmett arched a brow, his tone turning icy. "You speak quite freely for a nurse, Miss White. But very well, if Lucas chooses to ignore critical business responsibilities—" Lucas interrupted, voice taut with suppressed fury. "Don't act like this is my doing. Someone tried to kill me, remember? And here you are waving documents." Emmett's gaze flickered, something akin to frustration showing beneath his polished facade. "Look, Lucas, if you genuinely suspect I had any hand in this sabotage, be direct. But accusing me won't change the fact that the company needs leadership." A tense pause hung in the air. Isabella noted Lucas's shallow breathing, the strain evident in his clenched fists. She worried he might tear at his bandages if he continued. Wanting to keep him calm, she stepped between them. "Emmett," she said, her voice unwavering, "you have to leave. Doctor's orders. Lucas needs minimal stress. If you want to leave paperwork, do so. Otherwise, go." Emmett's nostrils flared, but he nodded curtly, digging into his briefcase to extract more documents. "Fine. Here, another set. Updates to the previous ones. Review them, sign if you care about the enterprise." He turned to go, then paused at the doorway, casting a final glance at Lucas. "Brother, if you recall any detail that might exonerate me or lead to the real culprit, share it. I don't appreciate living under a shadow of suspicion." Lucas said nothing, merely stared, face stony. Emmett left, and the guard promptly shut the door behind him. A beat of silence followed. Isabella exhaled, glancing at Lucas. His hands shook slightly, residual anger coursing through him. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He swallowed hard, forcing his muscles to relax. "No," he admitted, "but I will be. Emmett, he's so controlled. I can't tell if he's guilty or just opportunistic." Isabella nodded, sympathy tightening her chest. She carefully set the new stack of documents aside, not wanting them in Lucas's immediate view. "We can deal with that later. Right now, focus on your therapy and recovery." He closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "Right." The afternoon passed with a somber mood lingering. Lucas rested off and on, occasionally rousing to eat or respond to Dr. Fowler's queries. The constant presence of a guard outside was reassuring, though every time footsteps sounded in the corridor, Isabella noticed Lucas stiffening, worried it might be another unwanted visitor, or worse. Shortly after lunch, Detective Rainey appeared again, this time accompanied by a younger officer. They requested to speak with Lucas privately, though Isabella remained in the room at his insistence. Rainey perched on a stool, her expression composed. "We have a bit of new info," she announced, opening her folder. "We've managed to enhance the store CCTV footage from the burner phone purchase. It's grainy, but we believe the individual buying the SIM card might be female, short hair, wearing a baseball cap. Hard to confirm. We're comparing it to known associates of yours." Lucas frowned, considering the possibility of a woman orchestrating his sabotage. "I have plenty of female rivals," he said ruefully. "Could be a disgruntled investor, an ex-employee." Rainey nodded. "We'll see. Also, we found traces of a chemical accelerant on remnants of your yacht. Our forensic team suggests the explosion was deliberately set to mimic a fuel line accident, but the compound used is commonly found in industrial sabotage cases. She paused. This points to someone with technical knowledge of boats or engines. Lucas glanced at Isabella, tension coiling in his shoulders. Someone who knew exactly how to blow the yacht, ensuring I was on it. The detective's eyes flicked up from her notes. Yes, that's why we suspect an inside source, someone aware of your habits, of how you'd handle a last-minute engine check. The younger officer stepped forward. Mr. Montgomery, is there anyone in your company specifically tasked with mechanical oversight of your personal vessels or a security detail who might have easy access? Lucas shook his head, exhaling. The yacht's maintenance was handled by an outsourced marina crew, but I never suspected them of ill will. Then again, he pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration mounting. It's possible they were paid off. Rainey closed her folder gently. We'll keep digging. In the meantime, I'd advise you to gather as much info as you can about those who had direct access. Marina workers, corporate staff, even acquaintances who visited you there. Lucas nodded, though Isabella sensed the emotional toll such reflection took. After the officers left, he sagged against the pillows, visibly drained. She hurried to fetch him water, pressing the cool cup into his shaky hands. He drank quietly, then spoke in a hushed tone. I feel stuck. Every new detail confirms it was sabotage, but no name, no face. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed. I know it's frustrating, but piece by piece the detective is getting closer. This was definitely no random accident. He forced a tight smile. I just want the final piece to surface, so I can breathe again. She nodded, gently brushing her fingertips against his bandaged forearm. You will. Let's hold on to that hope. Late afternoon settled in with a heavy lull. Isabella left Lucas briefly to arrange dinner trays and confirm the night shift's coverage plan. In her absence, Gianna kept watch, ensuring no unauthorized person stepped inside. The swirling atmosphere of secrets and half-truths lingered. Investigations continuing, Emmett looming, anonymous warnings unaddressed. By the time Isabella returned, the corridor felt quieter, the overhead lighting casting elongated shadows. She saw Emmett's assistant, James, in the distance, speaking with a security guard, presumably seeking permission to enter. The guard shook his head firmly. James looked irked, then marched off. Isabella noted the exchange with a twinge of unease. Emmett's camp was relentless. Inside room 417, she found Lucas dozing fitfully, brow creased. He stirred when she approached, eyes half open. Back, he murmured. She nodded, seating herself. Your dinner should be here soon. Any pain? He shook his head, though his face betrayed ongoing discomfort. No more than usual. Then, after a moment, he said, I appreciate you, Isabella. More than I can say. The sincerity in his gaze made her heart constrict. A few weeks ago, she'd known him only as the millionaire in a coma with a sabotage rumor trailing him. Now she was intimately involved in his daily fight for survival, sharing in each small victory and every new setback. She swallowed, returning the intensity of his look. I'm just glad you're still here, she said softly. Whoever tried to end your life underestimated your resilience. He offered a ghost of a grin. And yours. At that, a knock interrupted them. This time it was Gianna with the dinner tray. She flashed a friendly smile, noticing the closeness between Lucas and Isabella, but saying nothing. Placing the tray on the mobile table, she nodded to both of them. Call if you need anything. When Gianna departed, Isabella helped Lucas adjust the bed so he could manage the meal on his own. He attempted a few bites, but soon slowed, weariness draining his appetite. She took the tray away, quietly noting how his eyes kept drifting toward her, as if finding comfort in her steady presence. Finally, evening claimed the hospital again, the outside world fading into darkness. Lucas sank into a lighter sleep, lulled by medication and fatigue. Isabella settled into the chair, listening to the muted beep of monitors. Her eyelids felt heavy, but she resisted sleep, her watchfulness sharpened by the knowledge that dangers still prowled beyond these walls. About an hour into the night shift, Isabella's phone buzzed in her pocket, an unknown number. Heart hammering, she stepped out to the corridor and answered quietly. A familiar male voice whispered on the other end, "I have more information. Meet me on the 8th floor terrace in 15 minutes, alone." Then the line went dead. She stood there, pulse racing. The anonymous caller again. Could this be a trap or a genuine tip? She glanced at the guard, debating. Informing him might risk scaring away the informant or risk a setup. But was she willing to chance going alone? Guilt gnawed at her. Lucas was stable for the moment. Gianna was on standby if something happened. And if this caller truly held a key to unraveling the conspiracy, it might be worth the risk. Taking a breath, she told Gianna she'd be stepping out briefly to investigate a lead, advising her to keep a close eye on Lucas. Gianna's eyes widened with concern but nodded. "Be careful," she whispered. "I'll keep him safe." With that, Isabella made her way to the rarely visited terrace, located near an administrative wing. The corridors there were quieter, empty at night, except for the hum of vents and distant echoes of machinery. Her footsteps felt too loud as she approached the terrace doors, heart pounding. She found the door unlocked. Stepping onto the small outdoor area, she was greeted by a gust of cool wind and the glimmer of city lights below. Rain had ceased, leaving puddles reflecting the skyline. She scanned the space, noticing a figure cloaked in a dark hoodie standing near the terrace's edge, half hidden by a pillar. Her throat constricted. "Hello?" she ventured, keeping her voice steady. The figure turned, revealing a young man's face sharp with anxiety. He peered around, verifying she was alone. "Nurse White?" She nodded. "Yes. You called me?" He exhaled shakily. "I'm the one who warned you about Montgomery's danger. I work for the marina service that handled his yacht. I knew something was off weeks before the explosion." His voice trembled as if holding back a flood of information. Isabella's nerves tautened. "Then why not speak to the police?" He shook his head frantically. "I can't. They'd find me. The man who paid me to rig a partial device on the yacht. He threatened my family. I didn't realize it would be a real bomb. I thought it was a routine sabotage to cause damage. But then..." His voice faltered. She felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You actually touched the device?" The man hung his head. "They told me it was just a small disruptor, not lethal, but after seeing the aftermath, I knew they'd used me. I'm sorry." Fear and anger clashed in her chest. "Who hired you?" she demanded. "Tell me." He glanced around anxiously. I'm not certain. A middleman, but I recognize the accent. An associate of Emmett Montgomery, maybe. Or at least that's the rumor. I don't know for sure. But they wore business suits, carried official documents, spoke of ensuring a transition of power at Montgomery Enterprises. That's all I have. Isabella's pulse pounded. "If you come forward as a witness, we can protect you." He shook his head vehemently. "I can't. I just wanted to warn you that they're not done. They suspect Lucas remembers more than he does. They'll try again. Warn him. Don't trust any new lawyers or corporate reps. It's all a front." The wind picked up, ruffling the hood of his jacket. He checked a cheap wristwatch. "I have to go. I can't be seen here." Isabella reached out, desperate. "Please at least speak to Detective Rainey off the record. She can protect you. You hold the key to stopping them." The man trembled, stepping backward. "I'm sorry," he whispered, then turned and ran toward the terrace exit. She followed a few steps, but he was gone, vanishing into the dimly lit corridor. She stood there, heart thumping, the city lights twinkling below. The name Emmett floated back to her. Had it truly been him orchestrating this all along? Or was it another layer of misdirection? She clutched her phone, a swirl of anger, fear, and determination flooding her senses. For Lucas's sake, she had to do something with this information. Racing back through the hall, she reached the elevator and jabbed the button, trying to steady her breathing. She had to tell Lucas and the detective. This was the closest they'd come to a direct link implicating someone in the sabotage. Yet, as she ascended to the main floor, anxiety gnawed at her. If Emmett was truly behind it, or even if one of his associates were, he wouldn't hesitate to strike again, especially if the marina worker's confession leaked. Isabella tightened her grip on her phone, silently praying no harm had befallen Lucas in her short absence. She'd taken a risk leaving him. Arriving back at room 417, she found Gianna and the guard, both looking relieved at her return. Lucas was awake, worry plain on his face as he noticed her breathless state. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed. She locked the door behind her, stepping to his side. "I just got a confession from one of your yacht's marina servicemen," she began, voice trembling with adrenaline. "He says he was tricked into rigging part of the device by someone tied to your corporate circle, possibly Emmett's associate." Lucas's eyes widened, all color draining from his face. "Then it's Emmett?" She swallowed. "It's not confirmed, but there's a connection. He threatened the man's family to keep him quiet. We have to tell Detective Rainey immediately." Lucas lay back, breathing shallowly. 1,000 emotions flickered in his gaze. Betrayal, anger, a raw sorrow. "Then it's as I feared," he whispered. "My own stepbrother might have done this for control, for power." Isabella gently touched his shoulder. "We'll handle it. The detective will act on this. We'll protect that witness if we can find him again." He closed his eyes, a bitter laugh escaping. "So it comes to this, my own family." She felt a fierce, protective anger. "You're not alone. I'm here." He opened his eyes, meeting hers with a mixture of gratitude and despair. I can't believe this is real." Outside, thunder rumbled once more, as if echoing the storm raging in Lucas's life. Isabella squared her shoulders, determination fueling her next breath. She'd get Detective Rainey on the phone, reveal the new lead, and they'd confront Emmett head-on if necessary. Enough shadows and secrets. Lucas deserved resolution, and if that meant unmasking his own family member, so be it. In that hospital room filled with monitors' soft beeps, they shared a moment of silent resolve. No more running, no more hiding. The stage was set for a final confrontation with the truth, and Isabella vowed to stand with Lucas, come what may. A stormy twilight enveloped St. Aurelia Hospital, thunder growling across the sky like a distant menace. Inside room 417, a crackle of tension coursed through the air. Lucas Montgomery lay propped against pillows, his energy precariously balanced between fear and fierce determination. At his side, Isabella hovered, phone in hand, waiting for Detective Rainey to answer. Earlier that evening, Isabella had relayed the marina worker's shocking confession, the link implicating Emmett or someone close to him in Lucas's sabotage. Now, through the phone's speaker, Rainey's calm, methodical voice filled the hush of the hospital room. "You're certain it was the same anonymous caller who reached out before?" Rainey asked, pen scratching on paper. "Yes," Isabella answered, forcing her tone steady. "He confirmed he was involved, claimed he thought it was non-lethal sabotage. He refused to identify the exact mastermind, but he strongly hinted it was Emmett Montgomery's associate." Lucas exhaled in a shaky breath. "Which means Emmett or his circle orchestrated the yacht's explosion, and possibly the second attempt here." On the other end of the line, Rainey paused. "This is crucial intel, but we need actual evidence or a willing witness to implicate Emmett. Without that man's statement on record, it's still hearsay." Isabella swallowed. "He's terrified. Said he feared for his family. We lost him before we could push for official testimony." A soft sigh came over the line. We'll see if we can trace him. For now, if Emmett is truly behind this, we have to assume he'll make another move soon, especially if he suspects Lucas might recover enough to testify. Stay vigilant. I'll request a court order to question Emmett and his associates." They ended the call with solemn thanks. As the line clicked off, the beep of Lucas's IV drip seemed to grow louder in the tense silence. He closed his eyes, hand gripping the bed rail until his knuckles whitened. "So close," he murmured, voice trembling with equal parts anger and betrayal, "and yet we still can't nail him." Isabella set the phone on the rolling table near his bed. "Detective Rainey won't stop. Neither will we." She leaned closer, meeting his gaze. "But this means we have to be extra cautious. If Emmett thinks you have new evidence, he might try once more," Lucas finished bitterly. "To ensure I never leave this hospital." He pulled in a ragged breath, glancing down at his bandaged torso and arms. "Isabella, if it comes to that, you should keep your distance. I don't want you caught in the crossfire." Her response was immediate. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not leaving you alone, no matter what. We'll face whatever comes." His eyes shone with gratitude that he couldn't quite put into words. "Thank you." That night, in consultation with Dr. Fowler, they arranged to move Lucas to a more secure room on the uppermost floor of the hospital, a wing seldom used, typically reserved for high-profile cases needing extra privacy. Jacob Ross, the hospital's private security consultant, oversaw the transfer. A small elevator ride brought them to a corridor lined with only a handful of rooms, each equipped with advanced locks and minimal foot traffic. The windows here overlooked the city from a greater height, storm clouds flickering with distant lightning. Lucas endured the move quietly, wincing whenever the wheelchair jostled his bandaged injuries. Isabella and a guard remained close, ready to intervene if any suspicious figure appeared. But they made it without incident. Soon, room 1123, with its reinforced door and upgraded surveillance camera outside, became Lucas's new refuge. Ross patted the doorframe. "This is the best we can offer. Multiple checkpoints, plus a coded lock only a select few have. We'll post a guard at each end of the hall." Lucas nodded. "Thank you." Though a part of him felt uneasy about hiding away, he recognized the necessity. Ross's gaze shifted to Isabella. "Nurse White, Dr. Fowler said you'll keep your shift near him. I'll coordinate with you if anything changes, or if we spot suspicious activity." She agreed, despite the exhaustion tugging at her. "We appreciate it." Once the door shut, leaving just Isabella and Lucas alone in the new room, he looked around at the freshly painted walls and the sparse furnishings. "Feels more like a bunker than a hospital," he observed, trying for wry humor. "Better a bunker than a target," Isabella replied softly, wheeling over an IV stand to ensure nothing tangled with his bandages. "Let's hope it's temporary." By midnight, the storm raged harder, sheets of rain battering the tall windows. The city lights shimmered, half obscured by the downpour. Lucas drifted in and out of restless sleep, occasionally jolting awake from nightmares. Each time, Isabella was there, offering water or a gentle hand on his shoulder, her own fatigue mounting. At around 2 a.m., she decided to take a brief break to splash water on her face and replenish supplies. Gianna had offered to relieve her, but the new floor was short on extra staff, so Isabella slipped into the corridor, double-checking that the guard stood at his post, and hurried to the supply station. After gathering fresh bandages and saline, she made her way back, but as she approached room 1123, an odd prickling sensation made the hairs on her neck stand up. The guard outside was gone. The corridor was eerily silent, the overhead lights flickering with the storm. Her pulse spiked. She rushed to the door, hand trembling on the handle. "Lucas?" she called quietly. No reply. The coded lock beeped under her keycard, then clicked. She shoved the door open, breath catching. Inside, the light was dim. Lucas lay on the bed, eyes wide, face tense. Standing over him, near the IV line, was James, Emmett's assistant, wearing a black jacket instead of his usual suit coat. A syringe glinted in his left hand. Isabella's heart lurched. "Stop!" she cried, voice ringing through the hush. James whipped around, surprise contorting his features. "Get back!" he hissed, brandishing the syringe threateningly. Lucas tried to speak, but a muffled groan left his lips, his face contorted with pain. Isabella realized in a flash that James must have injected something already, perhaps a sedative or worse. Fury roared inside her. "You're not harming him again!" she snarled, dropping her supplies and lunging forward. James attempted to shove her aside. He was taller, stronger, but adrenaline fueled Isabella. She dodged, seized his arm and twisted, forcing the syringe to clatter onto the floor. James cursed, struggling to yank free. His elbow caught Isabella in the side, pain exploding across her ribs. Still, she refused to let go. "Lucas, hold on!" she shouted, ducking another wild swing. She slammed her forearm into James's chest, using every ounce of momentum to drive him back. The overhead lights flickered again, thunder rumbling in tandem. Lucas, dazed, managed to press the bed's call button repeatedly, triggering an alarm that echoed in the corridor. James, hearing the alarm, panicked. He shoved Isabella violently, sending her stumbling. She collided with the rolling tray, nearly toppling it. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she steadied herself. James bolted toward the door. Isabella, heart pounding, scrambled to block his path, but he barreled past, muscles fueled by desperation. She lunged for his jacket, yanking him off balance. They crashed against the door frame, the handle digging into her hip. Another elbow jab had her gasping. Abruptly, the door flew open, revealing Jacob Ross and the missing guard, both gripping batons. James, cornered, tried to dodge, but Ross moved with practiced speed, hooking James's arm and forcing him face first against the wall. The guard pinned James's wrists behind his back, cuffing him with swift efficiency. "Don't, please, it's not my fault. I was ordered," James babbled, eyes wild with terror. Ross pressed him harder into the wall, silencing him. Isabella, breathing heavily, rushed to Lucas's side. "Oh God, are you all right? Did he inject you?" Lucas's eyes fluttered. "He got some," he muttered, voice slurred. The faint rivulet of fluid trickled from the IV line, indicating tampering. Alarmed, Isabella quickly clamped off the IV tube. "Stay with me," she urged, checking his vitals. His pulse hammered, breathing unsteady, pupils dilated. She turned to Ross. "Call Dr. Fowler now. He's been dosed with something. We need a crash cart on standby." Ross nodded, whipping out his phone and barking instructions. The guard kept James pinned, who ranted about following orders, protecting the company, and they said it was reversible. His voice cracked with desperation. Within moments, Dr. Fowler and a medical team burst in, adrenaline pumping. Isabella helped them detach the compromised IV line and hook Lucas up to fresh monitors. While the staff prepared emergency measures, she clutched Lucas's hand, murmuring soft encouragement. "Breathe. Stay awake if you can." Lucas blinked hazily, fighting to remain conscious. I can't believe, James." Isabella squeezed his hand. "Focus on me, Lucas. Just keep breathing." On the other side of the room, Ross and the guard wrestled James out into the corridor. The man's protests echoed, mingling with distant thunder. "I only did what Emmett told me," he cried, right before Ross cut him off. His confession resonated starkly in that tense space. Dr. Fowler's quick actions stabilized Lucas. She administered a counter-sedative, swiftly drawing blood samples to identify the exact toxin. Isabella stayed glued at his side, helping check blood pressure, holding on to his hand. The fierce adrenaline in her system finally ebbed as she realized Lucas was breathing more easily, his vital signs leveling out. Relief, mixed with tremors of aftershock, coursed through her. Ross reappeared after handing James over to the police, who arrived in record time. "He's been taken in," Ross reported quietly. confessed to a direct order from Emmett Montgomery. His expression flickered with grim satisfaction. "We've got him on tape." Lucas's eyelids fluttered. The sedation from James's injection still weighed on him, but he managed a low, rasping statement. That's the proof." Isabella bent closer, tears threatening to spill. "You're safe," she whispered. "We have what we need. Rest now." He exhaled, head lolling against the pillow. Dr. Fowler gave Isabella a nod of encouragement. "We'll keep him under close observation all night. Whatever toxin James used, we caught it early." The tension that had gripped them for weeks loosened an inch. Detective Rainey arrived minutes later, breathless, accompanied by uniformed officers. She took one look at Lucas's state and nodded grimly. "James is in custody, already singing. He named Emmett as the instigator, claiming Emmett arranged everything, coercing the marina worker, setting up the hospital plot." A hush fell as Rainey continued. "He'll be charged, and with James's testimony we can seek an arrest warrant for Emmett. This might finally be over." Lucas, half-conscious, let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Isabella pressed a hand to his shoulder, relief washing over her. The detective's words felt like the first true sunrise after a long night of terror. All through the night, hospital staff and police bustled around room 1123, finalizing statements and ensuring Lucas's safety. A second security guard was posted outside, plus an officer sent by Rainey. The storm raged on, lightning flashing periodically against the dark windows, but inside, a sense of resolution grew. Emmett's conspiracy, long hidden in the shadows, was finally exposed. Dawn arrived with weary smiles. Lucas slept under sedation, free for the moment from nightmares. Dr. Fowler declared his vitals stable, though he'd need further tests to confirm no lingering drug effects. Isabella hovered, exhaustion etched on her features, but also a profound sense of triumph and relief. They had survived. They had unmasked the saboteur. By mid-morning, the sky began to clear, pale sunlight streaming in. Isabella gently roused Lucas, who blinked at her, eyes still cloudy from medication. "Hey," she murmured, "you're safe. James confessed everything." His gaze darted around, registering the presence of an armed officer and the intense quiet of the special wing. "It's real, then," he croaked. "Emmett will face justice." She nodded, tears of joy glistening. "Yes, you can focus on healing now without fear." He swallowed, emotion swelling. "All thanks to you," he said softly. "If you hadn't come in when you did—" A shudder rippled through him at the near miss. She squeezed his hand, a tender smile gracing her lips. "We got here together." The following days blurred with legal processes. Emmett was arrested after James's testimony matched the marina worker's confession. Detective Rainey coordinated with prosecutors, ensuring Lucas was protected while he gave a preliminary statement. Though physically drained, Lucas found renewed strength in the knowledge that the threat was no longer anonymous. Slowly, steadily, he made real progress in physical therapy, walked short distances down the corridor, lungs growing stronger. Though the wounds still ached, a sense of freedom lit his eyes. Montgomery Enterprises, meanwhile, was forced to regroup without Emmett's looming presence. Loyal executives contacted Lucas, offering support and relief that he was alive and vindicated. On the personal front, Isabella remained his constant companion. Even after the immediate danger subsided, she found herself drawn to him and he to her. One afternoon, as Dr. Fowler cheerfully removed a final set of bandages, Lucas reached out for Isabella's hand, smiling through the lingering discomfort. "You never left," he said, voice quiet but radiant with gratitude. "You risked your life for me." She met his gaze, heart fluttering. "I couldn't do otherwise. It's like, from the moment I whispered you back from that coma, I knew I'd fight for you." A hush settled. Dr. Fowler, discreetly busy with her notes, pretended not to notice the tender exchange. Lucas swallowed. "I don't want to be just your patient anymore, Isabella. Once I'm discharged, I'd like to see you outside these walls if you're willing." His cheeks warmed at the raw vulnerability in those words. Isabella felt her own cheeks flush. She recalled the sleepless nights, the deep conversations, the shared fear and hope. "I'd like that too," she admitted softly. At last, on a clear morning, sunlight bathing the hospital in golden rays, Lucas Montgomery prepared to be discharged. He stood in the corridor, leaning on a cane for support, wearing casual clothes instead of a hospital gown. Isabella helped him check out, handing final paperwork to the clerk. Jacob Ross and Detective Rainey were both present, ensuring he had a security detail for the next few weeks until Emmett's trial concluded. Lucas thanked them all, voice brimming with sincerity. Then, turning to Isabella, he took a slow, measured step forward, cane in one hand, the other reaching for her. She grasped it gently, heart thudding. "You ready?" she asked, smiling. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, eyes shining with both relief and the promise of a future finally free from violence. Together they walked through the hospital's automatic doors, stepping into warm daylight. The city sprawled before them, uncertain, yes, but waiting. Lucas inhaled a shaky breath, no longer feeling hunted. Emmett was behind bars, the sabotage exposed, and a new chapter beckoned. As the sun touched his face, Lucas glanced at Isabella with gratitude that words couldn't encompass. She had stood by him, through conspiracies, midnight kisses, and narrow escapes, and they'd emerged side by side. She squeezed his hand, a bright smile lighting her features. "Come on," she murmured. "We have a lot of living to do, Mr. Montgomery." He chuckled, leaning close, allowing her to guide him forward. In that moment, all the fear and turmoil faded in the warmth of their shared victory. And while the road ahead might hold new challenges, they knew they'd face them together, bound by a story of survival and a bond forged in the quiet hush of a hospital room, sealed by a compassionate nurse's gentle kiss that called a wounded soul back to life. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.